massive response by the West Midlands Fire Service to combat a growing blaze in Stourbridge in the West Midlands. It started out as a grass fire near a golf course, but in the intense heat today, it spread and started burning through at least 6 houses. Aerial footage from the scene shows smoke and flames billowing into the sky. We're going to begin by crossing live to LBC's Midlands reporter George Ike, who joins us from the scene there in Stourbridge. And George, this is obviously a very serious set of developments. What is the latest that you're hearing there? Good evening.
Good evening, Simon. Well, essentially, large swathes of the West Midlands are on fire tonight. A number of fires burning within the area of West Midlands Fire and Rescue Service, including this one here in Stourbridge. We also have a fire by the M6, a number of other fires, and just across the border in Warwickshire, a major incident declared for yet another wildfire there, as you say, on the hottest day of the year so far. To bring you up to speed on what's happening here, this was a grass fire that began at around 1:30 today. Firefighters have been tackling that ever since, and the presence here is enormous. A nauseating smell of smoke billowing through the air, Simon, and ash falling just about everywhere. My car is covered in ash at the moment. I've seen some pictures that have been shared amongst locals on WhatsApp that show homes that have been completely burnt out, windows smashed, doors completely burnt through. That gives you an idea of just how bad it is here. That's burnt part of a golf club, a number of houses, and the real problem that firefighters are facing is the wind. It's not been windy for the last few days. Today, the wind is really strong and it keeps changing direction, pushing that fire and pushing that smoke with it. I'm joined now, Simon, by Joe, who lives in Stourbridge. Joe, good evening. This is a huge fire, isn't it? That smoke's everywhere.
Yeah, it was massive, to be fair. I live just across the way down the road, and even when it first started, I could see the smoke coming over from the field. So yeah, it was huge.
And all of these fire engines as well, people being evacuated. It's been a huge response, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, very, very big response. When it first went off, I went up the road just to see what was going on. And there was just short of, I'd say, about 30 fire engines. And that was only about 15 minutes after I first smelt the smoke and saw the smoke. So, yeah, a massive response.
And what about your house and friends' houses? What's the picture like there at the moment?
Yeah, so my house, thankfully, is okay. There's a lot of smoke over there and a lot of debris from the fire. But I have a few friends who live in the close proximity to where the fire started, and a lot of them have been evacuated from their homes, unfortunately.
We've heard a lot of bangs as well throughout the afternoon as the fires spread. Have you heard anything about what that might have been?
I'm not sure what it's down to. I've definitely heard them, and when I went to check out what was going on, it was very loud. It was very, very loud. There was a lot of bangs, a lot of crashes as well. So yeah, I'm not sure what the cause is, but I've definitely heard them.
OK. Well, Simon, I've been to a number of fires as temperatures have soared so far this year. This is by far the worst and by far the largest. We've got resources from right across the Midlands being called in to help here. We've got Staffordshire Police helping man this cordon because it's so big that they need more bodies on the ground. We've seen plainclothes detectives who would normally be working in roles like in the drug team and the knife crime team being brought in to man the cordon. That is giving you a picture of just how serious the situation is here in Stourbridge. Let's cross the border into Warwickshire for a moment and touch on that fire as well. That's been declared a major incident. Began around 2:30 this afternoon in Stratford-on-Avon at Salford Priors. It was a wildfire that had spread to nearby outbuildings. Currently, a large number of appliances working to put that fire out. But the challenge with all of these fires is, Simon, that it's not just one big fire. Here in Stourbridge, from the aerial images I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen in the studio, it's lots of pockets of fire in quite a large area, and that is going to be the problem moving forward, is how they can tackle all of those at the same time.
And George, when I look at the aerial images that we've seen from the fire that you're covering there in Stourbridge, it does seem as though some of those houses were absolutely fully engulfed. I mean, I presume that there are families tonight that have lost their homes there.
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. We've had people whose parents live just a couple of streets down from them and they've evacuated their house and then come to help their parents evacuate their house. It is your absolute worst nightmare. It's been described by some people as like living in a horror film. And actually, if you look on the LBC app, there's quite a striking picture of a firefighter and a police officer walking out of the smoke, ash falling around them, carrying bottles of water, because the water pressure is so low here in Stourbridge at the moment, because all of the water is needed to try and put these fires out.
George Ike reporting for us live from Stourbridge, LBC's Midlands reporter. Thanks very much indeed for that. Now, those scenes in Stourbridge, as I was saying, come on the 5th hottest day on record in the UK and absolutely the hottest day of the year so far. We hit 38.1 degrees in London today. And I didn't hear a single conversation on the bus, on the train, in the takeaway that was not about the heat and how we need to adapt to it. 2026 has already smashed the record for the number of days on which the temperature topped 30 degrees. Today was the 36th day of temperatures exceeding that point. Taken together, that is more than a month of this year at which, at some point, the temperature has soared above 30 degrees somewhere in the UK. But this hour, I want to talk again tonight about what you want the government to do about climate change and how soon. If you were listening last night, you will know that I was not particularly impressed with what appears to have been the only outcome of yesterday's Cobra meeting chaired by the Prime Minister, a decision to urge us all not to buy or to sell portable barbecues. Now, we can probably avert some wildfires that way. There's no question about that, and that's a good thing. But the more that this day has played out, the more I think you can argue that no Prime Minister has ever been better positioned coming into office as a result of the weather to lead a national conversation on climate change and tell us what the plan is going to be. But so far, from Andy Burnham on that issue, we have heard crickets. However, an hour ago, Foreign Secretary Ed Miliband, the former Energy Secretary in Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet, published a video on his social media feed. It begins with a series of images of the climate change impacts that we have all witnessed this year.
This isn't normal. Or this, or this. These heat waves are sending us a message. We can all agree that national security is the first responsibility of any government, and the climate crisis is now a serious national security threat to the British people. Heat waves, wildfires, droughts are all going to become more common, but the good news is we can act. As Foreign Secretary, I will work with countries around the world to build a coalition for action. At the United Nations in September, I'll be bringing together foreign ministers to discuss how we respond to this new national security threat. And when countries work together, we can bring down emissions, slow temperature rises, and help people adapt to the warming world. I feel this so deeply. We owe it to future generations to act. Our planet is sending us a warning signal, and we are going to listen.
Why are we hearing that from Foreign Secretary Ed Miliband and not the Prime Minister? What do you want the government to do about climate change and how quickly? He says it's a national security threat. Do you agree? And do you think the Prime Minister agrees? Call me at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. I'm joined on the programme this evening by Caroline Lucas, former leader of the Green Party, now a Professor of Practice in Environmental Sustainability at the University of Sussex. Caroline Lucas, thank you so much for being with us on LBC this evening. I know that, like myself, you also were somewhat surprised that nothing more came out of that Cobra meeting yesterday than the urging of the Prime Minister for all of us not to go out and buy or to sell to people portable barbecues. It's got to be time for him to move faster and further than that, surely. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you. Yes, to say that I was surprised, I think is probably putting it very mildly. I was horrified, frankly, that a Cobra meeting, these are the meetings that happen when there is supposed to be an emergency response from government, that a Cobra meeting chaired by the Prime Minister himself at this moment of absolute critical importance when the country has, 3/4 of England in drought, wildfires raging, as we've just been hearing, farmers warning us we've got the worst food security crisis in decades. It frankly beggars belief that the principal response from that Cobra meeting was nothing more than this polite request to consider withdrawing disposable barbecues. You rightly say that we need a national conversation. And I'm so glad that Ed Miliband has made the intervention that he has. Well, let's hope that Andy Burnham is listening, because his silence on this issue is deafening in a sense. It is absolutely remarkable that at this very moment when, as Ed Miliband himself says, nature is sending us the loudest possible message, we have a prime minister who now seems to have gone AWOL when it comes to responding to this climate emergency. What I would love to see him do is to pick up this idea of an emergency briefing. There's a big initiative out there, you might have heard of it, called the National Emergency Briefing. What they are calling for is for the Prime Minister himself to host a briefing for the whole country on national television that would make sure that all of us understand the nature of the threats that we face, because it also beggars belief that at this very moment, we also have a Conservative Party saying that no new Conservative candidates can put themselves forward at the next general election if they support action on the climate. This is preposterous. This is madness. We have to make sure that everyone, including parties of the right, understand the scale of the nature and nature of the threat we face.
With regard to the Prime Minister, what do you say to those listeners, and we had several last night, and I suspect we'll have more again tonight, who say, give him a chance, he's only in his 4th week?
Well, he's had a chance already to do things like take action on bus fares. That's a proposal that I support, but it's something that he found time to do. He's found time to talk about vertical drinking, hasn't he, in pubs, that we should be able to sit down while we have our pint in our pubs. So he seems to have been able to make time to make a raft of other announcements. And I think his silence on this issue is really unforgivable right now. What we needed to come out of that Cobra meeting, which has around the table all of the key players when it comes to keeping our country safe, at the very least, we should have had things like, how do we make sure that our fire service has all the resources that it needs? How is it that the UK doesn't have a single so-called water bomber for aerial firefighting? We've had firefighters saying that they don't feel that they've got the right clothing or equipment. We've just heard about this terrible fire in Stourbridge. We know that we need to change our firefighting methods to deal with the kinds of fires we're facing today. There was already a fire in London a couple of years ago, where on that day, the 19th of July, 2022, every single fire engine in London was used because it was being required by different fires around the capital. What have we learned since then? How do we make sure that the water pressure doesn't go down as it did in London back in 2022, and as it sounds like it might have been happening in Stourbridge today? There is so much that could be done to keep us safer, and that starts with some far more far-reaching practical measures from this Prime Minister, as well as taking action when it comes to briefing the country on the nature of the climate crisis and urgently ruling out yet more drilling in the North Sea. If he doesn't rule that out, essentially he is himself pouring petrol on the fire.
0345 6060 973, text 84850. What do you want to be hearing from the Prime Minister, and why isn't he delivering the kind of message you just heard from his own Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband? Simon Marks, in for Ian Dale here on LBC at 17 minutes past 7.
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m.
With voting underway in the Clacton by-election, join me from 10 for all the very latest news and analysis, plus concern over the workers staying at home because it's too hot. Is that a good enough excuse? And talking of feeling the heat, the music star in his 60s under pressure over his 19-year-old girlfriend. But has he actually done anything wrong?
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
The Big Arch just got bacon. More smokiness, more crispiness, more deliciousness. With juicy beef, cheddar cheese and that Big Arch sauce. Now topped with crispy bacon. The Big Arch just got bacon.
Until 28th of September 2026, served from 11 a.m, subject to availability.
Up to speed.
Your Formula One podcast.
Round 12, we head to the Netherlands for the Dutch Grand Prix.
New episodes every Monday and Thursday on YouTube or Global Player.
When you're smiling. Banning Dental Group clinics with over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
Oh, I needed this trip. Oh, lounging in the sunshine. dipping my toes in the pool.
Oh, sounds lovely. Amalfi Coast, was it?
No. Brockwell Lido, darling.
Unwind by the pool without leaving the city. Thameslink Railway, where every stop is a story.
A home on our holiday park will help you relax.
Owning a holiday home will be stressful and upsetting.
It'll make money for you.
There are endless hidden costs.
Oh, yeah, we'll buy it back whenever.
We'll pay you a fraction of what it's worth. There are two sides to every story. If you bought a home on a holiday park, contact Holiday Park Advice Centre. Because if you were missold, we can help. Text ASSIST to 78900. Fees apply.
Simon Marks on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
We're going to get to your calls on the future of climate change policy here in Britain in just a few moments. But first, I want to get the latest on the other major story that we've been following throughout the afternoon and evening here. The train derailment that took place this afternoon in East Sussex, just outside Lewes. 3 carriages of an 8-carriage Victoria to Eastbourne service overturned. Pictures provided to LBC from the scene that you can see on the LBC app and the LBC website show that the rail line appears to have significantly buckled, although what caused that is not known at this point. A senior government source tells us there have been no fatalities, although the images do show passengers picking themselves up from a train that one witness described as being upside down. LBC's reporter Helen Hoddinott is with me here in the studio now with the very latest. And Helen, you do have some fresh information.
Well, that's right, Simon. We have just heard from the South East Coast ambulance who have confirmed that 2 people sustained serious injuries, also saying that there were about 150 people on board the train when it derailed this afternoon. This incident took place at around 3:54. This Southern Rail passenger train derailing close to Lewes Station. It was travelling north of the station at the time. Several of the rear carriages are understood to have come off the tracks and ended up lying on their sides. One of the carriages looked like it had slid partway down the grassy embankment, and we've seen photos showing the inside of the derailed carriages with passengers pressed up against the windows. We're told that there were quite a few older passengers on this train as well. Other photos show people out of their seats standing upright in the carriage at the new orientation that it was at, or climbing sideways out of the carriage into the grassy embankment to the side. Images too from outside showing people standing on top of the overturned carriages or sitting down in the gravel next to the track. And one with his 6-year-old daughter has told press how their train jumped vertically upwards. The emergency brakes went on, he said, and everything got thrown forward, saying it skidded for quite a while before it stopped. He said, we turned around and saw the whole back of the train was open and smoke and dust were pouring into the carriage, and they saw that the 5th carriage had gone on its side. He says a number of air ambulances flew in. He saw people with head injuries, blood and cuts, saying that passengers remained on board for about half an hour after the derailment. Adding, of course, that with the weather today, it was incredibly hot on that train because the air conditioning has stopped working and no windows or doors were open. Now, of course, there's been a huge emergency services response. There's been British Transport, police, paramedics and firefighters attending the scene. As we've heard from the government source has told LBC that there are no fatalities. And on that cause, we still don't have an official reason for the derailment. The photos that we have seen show what appears to be a buckled section of the track. And of course, we do know that in extreme heat, train tracks can buckle. But while there is an official investigation going on, we don't quite have the cause at the moment. But for now, transport's seriously disrupted and the public are being told to avoid the area.
Helen Hoddenott, LBC's reporter, thanks very much for that. And in terms of traffic being disrupted, there are certainly no train services running between Brighton and Lewes at the moment, between Haywards Heath and Lewes, and between Seaford or Eastbourne and Lewes. And travellers are being advised to obviously delay their journey until later today or use an alternative route to travel. Also joining me now is James McCleary, the Liberal Democrat MP for Lewes. Mr. McCleary, thank you very much indeed for joining us on what I'm sure has been a somewhat alarming day. Can you confirm, we've heard reports that at least 2 people have been injured and taken to hospital for treatment. There were no fatalities. Is there any indication yet, preliminary indication, of what may have caused this derailment? Good evening.
Good evening to you. In terms of the injuries, that's a very latest update. Is the 2 serious injuries. I've only just heard about that very, very recently, and it's very concerning news. It's obviously great to hear that there are no fatalities, because obviously I think when we saw the images of the incident, it did look very serious, and it is very serious. And so I think the first thought for most people was that maybe people might have died in the incident, but fortunately they haven't. So I hope that those 2 people who are being treated are okay. In terms of causes, look, we're going to have to wait for the rail incident investigation people to get down there and find out what happened. There's obviously the images of buckled tracks. We know that the extreme heat, both here and indeed elsewhere in Europe, has been causing issues for rail services, and we've had speed restrictions in the area for that reason. So we'll have to see what the investigation shows us.
I mean, we don't know, as you were saying, what the cause of this was, but the one thing we do know is that the emergency services had to respond to this incident in the middle of an oppressive heat wave, and that in and of itself sends us a message. And of course the passengers had to endure the entire incident and then the rescue and recovery of them in the middle of an oppressive heat wave.
Absolutely. And look, you don't have to go far down our way. You can see the South Downs are brown and dry and look like a tinderbox. It's had a huge impact, this latest heat wave, as are the impacts more widely of climate change, which we seem to be woefully underprepared for. The French authorities recently announced they were going to start replacing tracks to withstand heat up to 50 degrees. We've done little in this country to start to build our climate resilience. Obviously, for those passengers concerned, having the shock of what happened in terms of the derailment and then dealing with, as you say, really challenging conditions, just compounded the issues. And as for the emergency services, they just have our gratitude. There's an amazing response. I think your previous report mentioned the Air Ambulance, who of course a charity, and responded immediately to help people who've been affected. And I know that everybody in Lewes is enormously grateful for all of their hard work today.
And when you and your colleagues return to the House of Commons in September, do you think that the events, not only of today, but of the last several weeks, we're into the 5th heat wave of the year. This is the hottest day of the year, the 5th hottest on record. Are they going to result in at least you and your fellow Liberal Democrats, and I wonder what you think about cross-party views on this, is it going to result in fresh impetus for a national plan on climate change to be devised and implemented?
It's clearly urgent. I mean, as Liberal Democrats, we've been talking about this for a long time. As an environmentalist party, we've pressed so hard to get faster movement on what we knew was coming down the line. My whole lifetime, we've been warned that this was going to happen, that climate change was going to have huge consequences for all our lives. And you can see it's putting people's lives at risk. There are wildfires right now burning in this country, threatening people's homes. We've seen what's happened in the rest of Europe in that regard too. And now we're seeing potential impacts on other areas, including transport. So yes, it gives real impetus. I mean, obviously we have a by-election taking place today where the individual who caused it likes to deny a lot of these things are anything to do with climate change. And I think what we do need to work cross-party with the government and with other parties who do acknowledge this is real and get an action plan in place, because it's urgent, and it's urgent for us now, and it's even more urgent for my kids.
James McCleary, thanks very much for being with us at the end of what I know has been a challenging day. The Liberal Democrat MP for Lewes. Let's go to the phone lines now. Jack is in Enfield. Jack, what would you like to say about the future of climate change policy here in the UK? Good evening.
Good evening, Simon. Well, first of all, I'd like to say I urge your listeners to watch the National Emergency Briefing. You can watch it on YouTube. First of all, we need to watch that because it puts things in perspective and then work from there.
And what do you think people will take away from that? Those people who haven't seen it, what kind of perspective do you think that they will be encouraged to put all of this into?
That we can't beat around the bush and we need to get on with it. So that could mean putting funding into net zero technologies. For example, JCB have just done a Hydromax test in America with a hydrogen engine that broke the speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's technologies within that could be brought out and mass produced in the car sector. I don't know, but things like that. Or first of all,
but there needs to be a conversation, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there needs to be a conversation, definitely. And and people need to work closer to home rather than on their cars. Things like that, perhaps, or they have to rely on public transport.
Comprehensive plan. That's what Jack in Enfield is proposing, needs to arise out of this hottest day of the year and the 5th hottest day in the UK since records began. Jack, thanks very much indeed for calling in. After the news, we're going to look at the impact of the heat waves on something else that's vitally important, and that is our food supplies. Harvests are expected to be poor this year because there's been so little rain. I'm going to be joined by the farmer who set up the organic delivery service Riverford next. Now with the time at 7:30. The news headlines come from Tim Humphrey.
2 people have been seriously injured in a train derailment near Lewis in East Sussex, with 9 others hurt. 3 carriages overturned. All passengers have safely been taken off. A major incident has been declared. Homes are on fire and 2 people have been hurt in an extensive fire in Stourbridge in the West Midlands. The fire is affecting 40 acres of land, with 6 properties affected. It's been officially the hottest day of the year so far. 38.1 Celsius was recorded in Kew Gardens in West London. The LBC weather, cloud and showers in Northern Ireland and Scotland tonight, warm with clear spells elsewhere, and a low of 15 degrees.
This is LBC.
Here we see a family completely asleep. No arguing, no bickering, not a peep. Remarkable. When you travel by train with Southeastern, you unlock 2-for-1 entry and great discounts at over 150 attractions across London, Kent and East Sussex, like London Zoo, the Cutty Sark and Dover Castle. Job done with 2-for-1. Terms and conditions apply. Search Southeastern Railway 2-for-1. Buy your train tickets direct and pay no booking fees.
At Waitrose, you know you're a food lover when the delicious 3 for £8 deli spread is what you remember from the garden party rather than why you were having it in the first place. Make it a summer to remember with 3 for £8 on our Moorish deli range, including creamy mozzarella balls with fresh basil pesto and pine nuts, juicy black garlic chorizo with wildflower honey, and aromatic Thai green chicken meatballs. Available now at Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected stores online, subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and Partners and concessions.
Does your private medical insurance need a second opinion? At the Private Healthcare Company, we guarantee to save you money on your private medical insurance renewal, or we'll give you £100. We compare existing policies against major insurers, and if we can't find a policy for less, we'll give you £100. Guaranteed. Visit the-phc.com for full details. The Private Healthcare Company, your personal private healthcare broker. Simon Marks on LBC. Text 84850.
Which is what Scott has done from West Hampstead. He says, I agree 100% with everything Professor Caroline Lucas says. Andy Burnham's approach to climate change and our 5th heat wave reminds me of Emperor Nero, who reportedly spent his time fiddling while Rome burned. We need strong leadership on climate change, Mr. Burnham, and we need it now. That's from Scott in West Hampstead. Jackie has texted in to say, Simon, if the Prime Minister had focused on putting all his time into addressing climate change, you would all be up in arms that he wasn't addressing the cost of living. He literally can't win. Jackie goes on to say that Ed Miliband is doing what I would expect of a good foreign secretary, trying to rally a global approach to climate change. We can't do it on our own. You know that. That's text coming in from Jackie. Let's go to Rose in Tavistock in West Devon. Evening, Rose. How are you tonight?
Cross, Simon. Good for Miliband,
good for McCleary, good for Lucas. He's got to stop being so indefinite. Look, I've got 2 points. The first one, his approach to this barbecue thing was a perfect indication of how indefinite he is. It doesn't bode well. Idiots need to eat hot food in blazing sun and cook it in tinder-dry countryside. They are not going to listen, and neither are the shops, to please stop it.
So you think that when you say he was indefinite, when you say he was indefinite, you're referring to the fact that he's simply urging people not to buy them and not to sell them, right? I mean, whereas you think he should have just come out and out and said, I'm banning them.
Well, yes, it's a bit basic, isn't it? Lighting fires in the middle of the country, where they've already caused several of these vast things. You take sandwiches, for God's sake. I mean, how many 300-year-old beech trees have got to burn down? And I shouted yesterday, how many blah, blah, blah. And I said, he will wait until somebody's house has burned down. And then he might consider banning those things as a basic beginning. And then, may I add, not drill the North Sea just because Trump wants him to. I'm sorry,
well, I mean, he would argue. I mean, to be fair to Andy Burnham, who has indicated that he is open-minded about a conversation about the future of the North Sea, I don't think he would argue he's doing it because Trump wants him to do it. I think he would, if he decides to go ahead and do it, I think he would be arguing we need to do it because we need to find ways of diversifying our energy sources in an effort to try and reduce the cost of our energy supplies.
Yes, and that'll please Trump as well, won't it? I mean, the other thing is we've left it to the last minute, as other people have just been saying. It's utterly appalling, and just because people keep banging on about, oh, it's just weather and, and people must be able to make money, so we can't possibly tackle climate change because profit matters more than anything else in the world.
Well, and of course, as we've discussed earlier in the week, Rose, I think you may have heard our programmes earlier in the week, there are ways of making money out of the response to climate change. And if you were the Prime Minister, you could argue that that was one way of boosting economic growth by really putting some effort and energy behind industries and businesses that are focused on sustainability. Rose, thanks very much indeed for calling in. I just wanted to make one point coming off the back of the interview with Caroline Lucas. I was so struck before we came on air today in the newsroom watching these astonishing images of those fires in Stourbridge, and you just feel so terrible for the families there that have lost their homes, because we could see in the images that were being taken from media helicopters hovering above the scene that homes were entirely engulfed with fire. And there was a police helicopter hovering over the scene as well, but there wasn't a firefighting helicopter. There was no firefighting helicopter or aircraft dropping water onto the scene. And you know why that is? Because we haven't got any. And one of the issues that Zach Polanski was talking about when he was here at LBC just a few days ago was his view that the Green Party wants to tax fossil fuel companies, end their subsidies and use the money to acquire a fleet of aircraft and helicopters to fight fires. We've got to be at the point where this country, however you do it, has to find a way of securing that kind of equipment. We're going to come back to your calls on all of this in a moment, but first I want to look at the impact of the weather on the farming sector. There are farms all over the country that are going to be working through the night again tonight to bring the crops in. Some are literally starting to harvest at 2 o'clock in the morning to avoid the heat and maximise the very limited amounts of dew that are on the crops, which helps in some cases to make buyers want them more. And then once you've picked the crops, how do you keep the fruit and veg cool on its way to market? Joining me live on the programme tonight, Guy Singh Watson, the founder and creator of the food delivery service Riverford Organic Farmers, a farmer himself. Mr. Singh Watson, thank you very much indeed for talking to us on LBC. How is Riverford and other players in your sector, how are you responding to this extraordinary heat in terms of not just bringing the crop in, but then getting it to market? Good evening.
Good evening. Well, we are starting very early in the morning to try and bring things in as cool as possible. We're starting picking at 5 in many cases, or we were in the middle of the summer. It's getting difficult now. we're almost out of water for irrigation, so we're having to keep that for just the really high-value crops. I mean, about 50% of our carrots are a write-off, potato yields 25% down. Broccoli, Romanesco, cauliflowers, the summer crops will pretty much be a failure, I think. I mean, we do have irrigation, and some of our farmers have irrigation, but nothing like enough to deal with a summer like this summer.
But you're talking about, in terms of some of the products that you would normally bring to market, total failure of the crop.
Yeah, complete failures. And then others are just suffering stress. So, aubergines are aborting their flowers, runner beans doing the same. It's just been too hot, and that stresses the plant. Sometimes the pollen actually becomes sterile. So, we're well outside the sort of comfortable norms for the crops that we grow. And it's that sort of unpredictability in the weather and the extremes which are really the problem for farmers. The averages are irrelevant, really.
And in terms of bringing the items that you sell to market, what steps are you having to take to keep the fruit and veg cool, for example?
Well, I mean, everything's refrigerated. Pretty much every vegetable you buy, every green vegetable will be, you bring it in as early as you can in the day. It's often better to actually make sure you get all the heat out of it, get it down to about 5 degrees centigrade, or a lettuce. You might even try and get it down to 2 degrees centigrade, and that'll give it a bit more shelf life. But a crop that's been stressed in the field, so for instance broccoli, if it's been very hot and it hasn't had enough water, it will be stressed when you cut it, and it will go off very quickly in the supply chain, and typically it just goes yellow and looks very unsightly, and we're having to throw it away. We haven't harvested any broccoli yet.
What's your view on the need for the government, and arguably not just the government but other political parties as well, to find a way of leading a national conversation that leads to a comprehensive response now to climate change?
Well, in the case of my industry, vegetables, we desperately need to store more winter rainfall in reservoirs on farm so that we can use it during the summer. And that has been painfully difficult to get through both the abstraction licence. Actually, planning permission was fairly short. We've been battling with the Environment Agency for 4 years now over this. We've spent about £50,000 in compliance, and we're still waiting for the final thing. I mean, that is just way, way too slow. So I guess in that instance, I want government to get out of the way. I mean, in a high winter rainfall area like the southwest, it's really not an environmental issue building a reservoir. It may very well be in the southeast, where they have less than half the rainfall that we do. So I would say that was a pretty primary one. But I don't want grants. I just want the permissions to be easier.
And in terms of the impact of this drought and the issues that you are facing on food supplies, the availability of food and the prices of food that we're going to see between now and Christmas, what do you think the prospects are?
Well, the supermarkets have got farmers screwed down, so you won't see the prices going up very much. You may do in future years. I think there will be shortages of those, particularly the brassicas. So that's broccoli, cauliflower, Romanesco, big crops for us. And I think there are going to be serious shortages over the next couple of months. And then, of course, the crops that are growing now that we'd hope be for the winter, I mean, many of them aren't putting on the growth that you'd hope. So I think we may end up with shortages of crops later in the winter as well. But I mean, looking further ahead, we're roughly 55% self-sufficient in food. I mean, it's only about 20% in fruit, maybe 60% in vegetables. The idea that we can just go out and buy that on the world market, where most other countries are going to be, we're going to have a reduced supply due to climate change and an increased demand. I really think it's negligent of our government not to be putting a bit more effort into being more self-sufficient. In 1980, before we embarked on this journey of neoliberalism and letting the market decide, we were 80% self-sufficient in food, and I think we should be aiming to get back there.
Guy Singh-Watson, I'm very grateful to you for joining us on the programme. Farmer and founder and creator of the food delivery service Riverford Organic Farmers. Let's go back to the phone lines. Ricky is in Chessington. Good evening, Ricky.
Good evening, Fun. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you? What would you like to say?
Okay. I agree with Guy completely, and I actually get Riverford. So I'm a little biased, but yes, completely agree with him. There's a couple of issues with environmental change. Like things we can do that makes a difference. But as for, like Guy said, about crops being down, that's going to be an issue next year as well, because the price of fertiliser for farmers has gone up because of the Strait of Hormuz being
correct, absolutely.
not locked, but locked, you know. So that's going to cause issues next year for those that aren't organic. So there's going to be, like, next year there's an issue. But then there's a couple of things that people can do, like actively do, to lower their carbon footprint. And there's some that people don't agree with, and they won't do it because they just don't want to. Like, you don't need to change your car every 3 years. You just don't need to do it. Like, it's not carbon efficient to do it. So if you've got an old car that's 20 years old, you're better off just driving it until it's dead. Like, it's better, even though the emissions...
You mean environmentally better? It is not necessarily better from a budgetary perspective.
Well,
depends on the car.
Yeah, it depends on the car and how well you look after it. Like anything, you look after your body, and you will last longer and have less health issues later on.
But I mean, really, Ricky, what you need is government needs to play a role in having this conversation with the country. Yeah, I completely agree, and so. That's just one aspect, right? And then, so with Andy Burnham and his barbecue ban, I think it is silly because you can't ban stupid. Stupid people do stupid things, and you can't. Yeah, but you can definitely tell people not to do things that are obviously stupid.
Yes, absolutely. But even then, you will fail. And then the one biggest thing that we can do is if you go plant-based, it's such. If everybody was to do it, it would decrease carbon so significantly.
You mean plant-based in terms of what you eat?
Of what you eat, yeah. I mean, what you wear. I mean, I'm not going to say vegan because like the two are different. But,
right.
If you're plant-based, then you can really lower your carbon footprint. And I know some people are like, oh, but I like what I eat and this, that, the other. But if you care about the environment, it is a real one that makes an actual difference.
Ricky, thanks very much indeed for joining the programme this evening. Ricky in Chessington. Plenty of time for you to have your say on this. And coming up after the news at 8, we are going to talk about climate change in the workplace amid reports today that some nurses were collapsing and requiring treatment in the very hospitals in which they work. We're going to have that conversation in the 8 o'clock hour here on LBC. Time now, 14 minutes to 8.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Why is one of Reform's most senior politicians threatening the board of Vodafone with jail time?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Under the beating Serengeti sun, here we see a young pygmy hippo, spending its days frolicking in the mud, much like our...
Oh, Dad.
What?
Stop talking like that, you're freaking out the chimps.
Take a safari to London Zoo, with kids' train tickets for £2 on off-peak journeys. Thameslink Railway, where every stop is a story. Terms apply.
Switch it up this summer with Ford. Take to the streets with looks that thrill. Complete a test drive in August, and you could get up to £1,500 off with our Welcome to Ford promotion and discover other offers across the range. Search Ford Test Drive event to book and find out more. Steal the scene this summer. Ready, set, Ford. Available to customers looking to switch to Ford or upgrade an older Ford model. New cars registered by the 30th of September.
At Waitrose, you know you're a food lover when you're more gripped by the desserts you took to the park than your true crime book. Ooh. Make it a summer to remember with our dreamy range of #1 summer desserts. Like our secret centre strawberries with creamy mousse and zingy compote in every bite. Or our rich Madagascan vanilla ice cream, rippled with tangy blackcurrant. Available now at Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Deirdre, look, it's the Bottomleys this time, sliding across their car bonnet.
Leave them be, Philip. They're just claim confident.
Claim confident?
Yes, by doing their own car finance compensation claim, using the FCA's free tools to help, they'll keep 100% of what they're owed. I've just done ours too. Come on!
Deirdre? Deirdre? Come back here.
Start yours today with help from the Financial Conduct Authority. Search Claim Confident.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with Simon Marks.
And we've just had a statement in by Richard Parker, the Mayor of the West Midlands. He says, speaking about all the fires that are taking place in his region, this is an extremely worrying and fast-moving situation. I'm concerned for the families being asked to evacuate their homes and those whose journeys have been delayed or cancelled, but safety must come first. He says, I'm being kept up to date by the emergency services and the teams at Network Rail and TFWM, and I'd urge people to avoid the area and those in the town to follow the advice of police and firefighters on the ground. Our emergency services, he says, are doing an amazing job in extreme circumstances, and we will continue to give them our full support. That is coming in now from Richard Parker, the Mayor of the West Midlands. Let's go to Cambridge, where we find Ned tonight. Good evening, Ned.
Good evening, Simon. Lovely to speak to you again. How are you, sir?
I'm very well indeed, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, bless you. So I think the conversation has to be, the real one that has to be had is, why are the political classes still taking money off the oil and gas lobby, and why are we still giving them £17 billion a year to have them operate here, to look for fields in a depleted North Sea that we know is a bust, they know is a bust, and they give back 28 billion quid to, you know, the right-wing parties, of which 50% of the population are minded to vote for, to tell them to carry on doing the same thing. I think at the end of the day, the technology is already here. We're paying people to switch off wind turbines because we can't cope with the amount of electricity that we can generate already. We're surrounded by wind, wave and what have you. And I can only think it's just because they like it how it is, thank you very much. People are making money, they like it how they're making money, and why change it just for us plebs at the end of the day, because it's just not worth their time of doing it. I mean, the amount of technology and innovation that goes into, like, an oil rig, for example, could easily be switched over to all these other renewable energies, much more efficient, much cheaper, much quicker. That would then reduce the cost of living rather than relying on this up and down war market, oil price surging stuff that goes on. Until that is the conversation that we have, is like, why are you paying these people? Why are you taking money off them? We won't get anywhere, mate, I'm afraid.
Did you hear the audio of Ed Miliband's statement that we played a little bit earlier in the hour?
I didn't. Go on.
He said that climate change is a national security threat to the country. He says that he's going to convene a meeting of foreign ministers on the fringes of the UN General Assembly in September. And I think we can play you a clip of what he said. Let's take a listen.
This is normal. Or this, or this. These heat waves are sending us a message. We can all agree that national security is the first responsibility of any government, and the climate crisis is now a serious national security threat to the British people. Heat waves, wildfires, droughts are all going to become more common, but the good news is we can act. As Foreign Secretary, I will work with countries around the world to build a coalition for action. At the United Nations in September, I'll be bringing together foreign ministers to discuss how we respond to this new national security threat. And when countries work together, we can bring down emissions, slow temperature rises, and help people adapt to the warming world. I feel this so deeply. We owe it to future generations to act. Our planet is sending us a warning signal, and we are going to listen.
That's Ed Miliband in a message that he's put out this evening. Ned, I think you heard that. I hope you heard that.
I did,
Ed Miliband talking about convening an emergency conversation with foreign ministers at the United Nations. I'm curious about why we're hearing that from him, Mr. Net Zero in Keir Starmer's government, as opposed to the Prime Minister. Or am I just splitting hairs here?
Well, I'll tell you a true story, and I've told this story quite a few times on this show, on LBC. I've told it to Nick, and I've told it to Ian for sure. A friend of mine's an oil and gas lawyer, right? 20 years ago, he went to Chevron's head office to see the CEO, and on this guy's desk are these 3 cylinders. One's sandy, one's grey, and one's black, right? And my mate said, what's the ornaments? CEO said, well, these are core samples from oil wells. The sandy one is drilled out, The grey one is we've got most of it out, but it's a bit too expensive, so we've to get the rest of it, we've put a cap on it. And the black one is a new oil well. And he went, okay. He goes, but here's the thing. What's really interesting, he said, all the oil that we've ever drilled out ever since the start, and the first oil rig was in 1856 in Pennsylvania, right? He said he's still down there, but it's just too expensive to get out. So he put a cap on it. And that's all. So 100 and 200 odd years, right? Splitting the atom is nearly 100 years old, right? I'm talking to you on a phone that contains the entire, knowledge of human history, the size of a piece of toast over magic, right? But yet we can't stop drilling oil. We can't seem to come up with another way of powering things or whatever. It's out there. They just don't want to do it. And I think, Carl Sagan said, he goes, we'll go down in history as the only civilization that wouldn't save itself because it wasn't cost effective. And that's the conversation we've got to have,
I agree, Ned, and there's only one way that conversation can kick off, and that is when a government begins that conversation. Ned, thanks very much indeed for calling in. Let's go to Merthyr Tydfil, and Jeff is there this evening. Evening, Jeff.
Evening, Simon. Nice to meet you, so to speak.
Nice to hear your voice. What would you like to say?
Well, it's the whole selfish attitude of the world. It's not just one. We've got to sacrifice something to save the world, haven't we, basically? This government is not going to save it for you. It's going to be down to the individual. I was thinking that the only sort of money that's left in society is with the old age pensioners. Now, some of them are absolutely desperate, but there's a huge swathe of old age pensioners who go on cruises. One cruise, okay, just a suggestion, sacrifice one cruise, put solar panels on your roof and kit yourself out with some batteries. This is the way that you can start this. People have to sacrifice something, Simon.
Jeff, I agree with that entirely, but a spirit of volunteerism is not necessarily going to get us as far as we could go if we had a government that was actually grabbing this issue by the horns. And I know there are people out there that keep saying he's only in his fourth week as Prime Minister, which is absolutely true. But we are not only in our fourth week of dealing with climate change and heat waves and the threat that this is posing to the future of our country. And he's got to come out and lead the conversation. He's got to lead from the front, hasn't he?
He certainly has. And he's not showing that. Asking people not to sell barbecues is pathetic. Right.
Well, I'm not sure that asking people not to sell barbecues is pathetic, because I think we should be asking people not to sell barbecues or to buy them. Arguably, as Rose was suggesting earlier, he should just be banning the sale of barbecues. Exactly. But so in and of itself, I don't think it's pathetic, but I think that it is sorely lacking if that's everything that he's got to say about the situation in which we find ourselves tonight, never mind in September when Parliament returns from recess.
Yeah, well, to me, he should have said, supermarkets, stop selling them.
Yeah.
Don't ask them. It's pathetic to me that he's not saying to the supermarkets, stop selling them.
Yeah.
Now.
Rose was saying earlier that she thought that he was indefinite. I think he was diffident in that response. Jeff, thanks very much indeed. One bit of breaking news. The West Midlands Fire Service says that a child and 3 firefighters have now been taken to hospital following the wildfire in Stourbridge, which has left several houses on fire. We'll get more on that a little bit later on. Let's go to Matthew in Peterborough. Evening, Matthew.
Evening, Simon. So I'm going to start off with the whole question about Andy being in the office for 3 weeks. First of all, I defended the fact that he went on the holiday. I thought that was perfectly fine. But he just had a COBRA meeting around the wildfires that's gone across the UK, and he comes out and saying, please don't buy barbecues. Yes, he could have gone further. He could have said more. The fact that his foreign secretary was making a bigger statement on it, I think it's a bit ridiculous. The second thing I want to cover
why do you think it's ridiculous?
Because we have a energy minister that can be talking about net zero as well. I understand Ed Miliband was that minister at some point, and I do appreciate that Ed Miliband's done it. But Andy Burnham should have came out and been stronger on pushing on the emission of net zero and the effects that the climate's currently having. That's why I think it's a bit ridiculous that he hasn't came out and done that, and instead just went on a simple statement of saying it was disposable barbecues. Unless he turned around and said 80% of these fires have been caused by it, fair enough. Then I'll say, hey, come on, guys, stop buying barbecues.
Right. I think in the case of Ed Miliband, what we've seen is because he's foreign secretary, he's saying this is a national security threat, therefore we need to discuss it on the international stage. And he says he's going to do precisely that at the United Nations in September. I do think it is zoologically interesting that it's Ed Miliband, Mr. Net Zero from Sir Keir Starmer's government, who is making the running at the moment as far as government figures are concerned. And, Andy Burnham has published no shortage of social media videos. I wonder when we're going to see one that says something similar. Matthew, I've got to go to get to the news, but thanks very much indeed for that. We're going to keep talking about climate into our next hour. We're going to talk about the heat and your workplace.
The NHS has to make sure we are preparing for summer pressures now in the same way that we prepare for winter pressures.
That's Health Secretary Yvette Cooper telling LBC the NHS needs to adapt to the new summertime realities. But today, nurses were collapsing in some hospitals that don't have aircon, literally being treated in the very facilities where they were supposed to be working. The Royal College of Nursing says some hospitals are now impossible and inhumane places to work. 1,500 London bus drivers say the same thing about their cabs. They're going on strike in the morning. What was your workplace like today? And if you're an employer, how much is it going to cost you to make arrangements for your staff to work in comfort?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, a child and 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital tonight following a wildfire in Stourbridge in the West Midlands, which has left several houses on fire. Around 60 crew are at the scene in the Racecourse Lane area. The town hall has been set up as a rescue centre. Well, LBC's Midlands reporter George Ike is in Stourbridge for us this evening.
This was a grass fire that began at around 1:30 today. Firefighters have been tackling that ever since, and the presence here is enormous. A nauseating smell of smoke billowing through the air. I've seen some pictures that have been shared amongst locals on WhatsApp that show homes that have been completely burnt out, windows smashed, doors completely burnt through.
Also in the West Midlands, a major incident's been declared due to a large fire in Stratford-upon-Avon. Well, all this as today has officially been declared the hottest day of the year so far. A provisional high of 38.1 degrees Celsius has been recorded in Kew Gardens in London. In other news, 2 people have been seriously injured after a passenger train derailed in East Sussex. Several carriages can be seen on their sides near Lewes Station. The Southern Rail Service was heading from London's Victoria to Eastbourne when it crashed just before 4 o'clock this afternoon. James McCleary, Liberal Democrat MP for Lewes, told LBC he's grateful there are no fatalities.
When we saw the images of the incident, it did look very serious, and it is very serious. And so I think the first thought for most people was that maybe people might have died in the incident, but fortunately they haven't. So I hope that those 2 people who are being treated are okay. In terms of causes, look, we're going to have to wait for the rail incident investigation people to get down there and find out what happened. There's obviously the images of buckled tracks. We know that the extreme heat, both here and indeed elsewhere in Europe, has been causing issues for rail services.
A couple who offered sexual services so they could drug men and steal from them have been jailed for 17 years after 2 of their victims died. 31-year-old Adina Mihai and Madeleine Dimitri, who's 30, used the date rape drug GBL to knock the men unconscious. And for a third consecutive year, the number of A-level students getting top grades has risen. Boys have again outperformed girls. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 60 points at 10,773. The pound buy is $1.35 and €1.17. LBC weather, cloud and showers in Northern Ireland and Scotland tonight. Warm and clear elsewhere, lows of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
And I'm in for Ian Dale with you until 10 o'clock. We're going to be getting another live report from Stourbridge, the scene of that significant fire in the West Midlands in a few minutes' time. And later in the hour, we'll also be going live to Lewes in East Sussex to get more on the train derailment. This hour, we're going to talk about the heat and your workplace. I had a text on the programme last night from Dee, one of our listeners, telling me that her partner was going to be out at lunchtime today in long trousers and full protective gear, digging to backfill a grave for a 1 o'clock funeral. And she made the point that in some countries, public services would already have been suspended in the 38 degrees that he was going to be experiencing. Well, today, public and private employers are on notice. They are going to have to grapple with all of this. At 8:30, we're going to explore the bus strike that is beginning in the morning. 1,500 drivers, including those on my local route here in London, say they are being left to roast in their cabs. Of course, it isn't much fun for the passengers aboard either, but at least we all eventually get a chance to alight from the vehicles. The Royal College of Nursing said today dozens of its members were working in facilities not fit for humans, as temperatures never dipped below 30 degrees throughout their shifts. They say heat waves are making some hospitals impossible and inhumane places to work and to receive care, and said that there were even some NHS managers today who were not allowing staff to relax dress codes, which seems utterly ridiculous. One nurse reported that managers blocked the use of cooling systems in a facility where the mercury had topped 36 degrees. Some pregnant nurses said they were worried about the impact of working in 32-degree temperatures on the health of their babies. Both the public and private sectors are surely going to have no alternative but to take all of this seriously. If you were at work today, what was it like? If you're an employer, how much pressure are you under to spend money to make it more possible for your staff to endure these soaring temperatures? Have you got the money? And what kind of impact is it going to have on your business? Workplace stories between now and 9. You can call 0345 6060 973. It's the same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones. You can text 84850. Joining me now is Patricia Marquis, Executive Director for England of the Royal College of Nursing. Patricia Marquis, thanks very much indeed for being with us on LBC today. I mean, these reports of nurses collapsing in some hospitals today and requiring medical treatment in the very facilities where they were supposed to be providing medical treatment. I mean, how widespread was that? And more broadly, how inundated were you and your colleagues today with these concerns being expressed by your members? Good evening.
Hi, and thanks for talking about this, because it is a really, really important issue, not just to nurses, but as you can hear, to everybody. I can't say that we've been inundated. We have certainly seen a significant increase in the number of calls, and a lot of them. But it really is around nurses are incredibly tolerant, and they will always prioritise their patients over themselves. So we know that it's the tip of the iceberg, she says, the people that are actually contacting us. It really is a small percentage, we believe, that are doing that. But the stories that you can hear are probably replicated time and again. I spent the last couple of days actually in a couple of hospital sites in the east of England, and it was incredibly hot. When you're working in an environment that's often warmer anyway because of the nature of the business that you're working in, where there's lots and lots of people, lots and lots of equipment, and very old estate that isn't geared up to these high temperatures at all, sometimes doesn't have opening windows, and in the majority of cases has nothing like air conditioning. It is unbearable, and they are doing a very physical job stuck in a ward environment or a community environment in their car for hours and hours at a time.
And this, of course, is also happening at a time when the Health Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has put the NHS on notice and said that from now on, the NHS has to treat summers in exactly the same way as it treats winters in terms of making plans to be inundated with all sorts of cases relating to the weather.
Absolutely. Your listeners will all have heard about what we used to call winter pressures, which over recent years have increasingly become year-round pressures, with patients often being cared for then in corridors or other inappropriate spaces, which just creates more and more heat in reality, of course, the more people there are. But people's health is severely impacted by this extreme heat. It makes a lot of conditions worse. If you've got heart problems, if you've got chest problems, if you're elderly and vulnerable in other ways, it does make it worse. So people are coming to hospitals, going to their GPs, needing community services in increasing numbers throughout the summer. And we just can't cope. We have to be able to reduce the temperatures in these workplaces to make it safe, not just for staff, but probably as importantly for the patients, because what the staff are trying to work in is what the patients are trying to endure. They're sick, they're vulnerable, and then we're making it worse with the temperature.
Well, that's a very important point, because, of course, it's not just the staff that get affected by this. It is the sick that are in hospital trying to get the assistance that they need for whatever medical ailments that they are suffering from. What do you want the government at this point to do? Because clearly, providing air conditioning for the entire NHS estate, that isn't going to be done by next summer. But presumably you want to see some action on this as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Locally today, tomorrow, we want local employers to take the action they can take. As you highlighted before, it's not acceptable for employers to be ignoring the calls of their staff to say, please, can we relax the uniform policy? Please, can you provide us with fans? So we do need employers to actually step up, listen to their staff and provide a working environment right now that is more manageable than it is, with breaks, access to water, those sorts of things. The government has committed money towards investing in the NHS estate. That's a step in the right direction, but some of that money absolutely has to be to deliver modern climate adaptations. It cannot just be about fixing the estate's backlog. Some of it has to be to ensure that there is air conditioning, etc., in place. And finally, we would say to the government, and indeed to all of us as individuals, we all need to do what we can to prevent this situation getting worse. This is part of climate change. We all thought it was going to come in some years. We're living in it now. And absolutely, the government has to invest in the mitigations to reduce the emissions, which are part of what is causing this exponential rise now in the rate of climate change, and which is impacting our health and impacting on our workplaces.
Patricia Marquis, thanks very much indeed for being with us on LBC tonight, the Executive Director for England of the Royal College of Nursing. I am also joined this evening by Peter Carter, Dr. Peter Carter, Independent Health Consultant and Vice President of the Institute of Customer Service. He is a former interim chair of an NHS trust and also a former Chief Executive of the Royal College of Nursing. Dr. Carter, thank you very much as well for being with us on the programme tonight. I mean, there were all sorts of reports today, as we heard there from Patricia Marquis, from members of the RCN who were saying that they were getting pushback from managers when they said, we want cooling systems turned on. We want to be able to relax the dress code. We want some recognition of the situation in which we find ourselves. Why do you think that pushback was coming?
Well, first of all, Simon, thank you so much for covering this. And as my former colleague, Patricia, who you spoke to with just a few moments ago, said, this is a time when all the stops have to be pulled out in order to support not just nurses, but the whole multidisciplinary team. Think of hospital porters pushing trolleys around and all that. So it's affecting the whole of the workforce. And it's incumbent on all managers to do everything they can to try to ameliorate the effects of these temperatures. And if it means relaxing dress code, that sort of thing, providing water, the sort of facilities that a lot of offices take for granted, which the NHS in some places do not. There is actually a lot of very good NHS management, but the poor is the enemy of the good. And the other thing that compounds all of this is that nowadays nurses work a 12-and-a-half-hour shift. It's hard work at the best of the time, and in this temperature, it makes life pretty insufferable. And so people should be extra vigilant in ensuring that nurses have easy access to cold drinks and to try to take their breaks, which in many occasions, just trying to grab a cup of coffee or a drink of water becomes quite tough because people are so busy. So it is very difficult. Now, the climate change, the NHS, like the rest of society, has struggled to adjust to. We do need more money, but the current backlog maintenance is 13.8 billion. And I looked up the figures. To get even some basic air conditioning across the NHS would cost about £7 billion. To get it up to the standard that we would wish would cost £25 billion. And that's not going to happen because the money isn't there. And so the chickens have come home to roost. This isn't the fault of the Andy Burnham government. This is a long-term problem. But now's the time for the government to get a grip and to begin to say, OK, the weather has changed. It's here for the foreseeable future in the way that we're currently experiencing. Now is the time to do something about it.
I mean, you would accept they haven't got the money.
Well, therein lies the problem, Simon. And because for years and years, people have cut corners on backlog maintenance, the chickens have now come home to roost. Look, I hate to single out a hospital, but take the Queen Elizabeth at King's Lynn. Because of the reinforced autoclaved concrete, there are now 8,000 props holding up the ceilings in wards and departments. 8,000. Can you imagine lying in a hospital bed and around you, you've got all these props? I mean, being in a hospital bed is anxiety-provoking at the best of times. In that kind of environment, life is pretty difficult. So now we've got to accept we're in a mess. And now we need a plan to get out of it. So you need a here and now, some emergency measures to help the staff, which ultimately helps the patients. But you also need a long-term rebuilding plan. And the government will have to make very difficult decisions about what has to be cut or if taxes have to be raised in order to address this. There's no easy solution to it. But the reality is the problem is with us and it's not going to go away.
Dr. Carter, thanks very much indeed for shining a light on it for us this evening. Independent health consultant and Vice President of the Institute of Customer Service and a former interim chair of an NHS trust and a former chief executive of the Royal College of Nursing. Your calls about your experience in the workplace today. What was it like? How is your employer responding to you when you say, we're going to need to get some air conditioning, we're going to need to do something here? Is your employer supportive? Is your employer making plans? And if you are an employer, tell us what kind of costs you're looking at if you are truly to make not only your staff, but if you're in a retail environment, for example, your customers as well, more comfortable. Call me at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. It's 17 minutes past 8.
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m.
With voting underway in the Clacton by-election, join me from 10 for all the very latest news and analysis, plus concern over the workers staying at home because it's too hot. Is that a good enough excuse? And talking of feeling the heat, the music star in his 60s under pressure over his 19-year-old girlfriend. But has he actually done anything wrong?
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Us kids are mesmerised by the mundane, entranced by the everyday, where grown-ups see a snail, we see a slippery shelled beast from the undergrowth. But around 1 in 5 young children have a sight condition that can get in the way of all that wonder. The good news is, if these are found early, they can be managed or corrected. So book your child a free eye test at Specsavers today. Find out more at specsavers.co.uk/kids tests.
Here we see a family, completely asleep. No arguing, no bickering, not a peep. Remarkable. When you travel by train with Southeastern, you unlock 2-for-1 entry and great discounts at over 150 attractions across London, Kent and East Sussex, like London Zoo, the Cutty Sark and Dover Castle. Job done with 2-for-1. Terms and conditions apply. Search Southeastern Railway 2-for-1. Buy your train tickets direct and pay no booking fees.
Look, there's a snail! And its eyes are sticking out of its antlers. It looks like an ice cream.
Ella sees a lot more than just a snail. With free kids' glasses from Specsavers, plus a second pair from £10, they'll see a world of wonders. And you'll see a great deal too. So book them an appointment at Specsavers today for free. £10 second pair with free glasses from our £65 and above range.
Conditions apply. See online for details.
Simon Marks on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Or you can text us at 84850. Deborah has texted the programme to say, my mum passed away amongst those props at King's Lynn Hospital. It was hideous. That's a reference to Dr. Peter Carter telling us that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn is basically being held up by wooden props. And Deborah, I'm very sorry that you had to endure that experience. Let's go to Alicia, first-time caller to LBC from Tottenham. Alicia, good evening to you. How was your time in the workplace today?
Hi, Simon. Thank you for having me. So I'm a nurse and I work on oncology wards, and it can get very, very hot, up to mid-30 degrees Celsius. Our uniform policies are quite strict, unfortunately, and we have to wear quite thick material clothing as well while we're on wards, and that's obviously to help the patients identify our different roles. So I do understand that. But what I wanted to raise the point is that we don't even have air conditioning in the NHS, which is quite bad. My colleague actually has fainted on the wards due to this. I felt very lightheaded. One of the interviewers has made a good point that we don't even actually fully get our breaks. So we are working 12 hours with no breaks, dehydrated as well. It's very, very tough.
I mean, and when you raise this with managers there, for example, I mean, I understand about the dress code, but when you raise with managers the fact that people are passing out in this kind of heat, what do you hear back?
Well, they're just told to go to the break room, get some time for themselves, drink some water, and essentially come back on the wards. And we're also always understaffed as well, so we can't really afford to be losing our colleagues, because then there's more workload on the rest of the colleagues. So it's just a knock-on domino effect. So, yeah.
And Alicia, what is the impact of those kind of temperatures on patients?
So our patients are immunocompromised due to the disease and cancer that they have. So they often tend to get very sweaty, which causes them to get quite flustered, which then in turn affect their immunity, and they are more likely to basically catch infections as well. Then they're not able to see their family as well. So they're now isolated in these hot temperatures because, we have no AC, so they can't even cool down. So we just have to give them ice packs. That's the best we can do.
I mean, someone has texted into the programme. I've lost the text, but there was a listener that texted in saying that you've got to be very careful with air conditioning in hospitals because air conditioning can spread germs and disease. I mean, I spend most of my time, Alicia, living in the United States. There are very few hospitals, certainly in Washington, D.C., that don't have air conditioning. In fact, I'm not sure there are any hospitals in Washington, D.C. that don't have air conditioning. I can't imagine an American medical facility that in the summer didn't have aircon, so they've clearly dealt somehow with the spreading of disease via air conditioning units, but also it has to mitigate in favour of better patient outcomes, never mind the situation that you and your colleagues are facing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was not aware that germs can be spread through AC, but I mean, I don't know what they're doing in the US hospitals to kind of manage the heat, because I'm sure it's hot over there. So, I mean, I'm going to do more research and see what they're doing maybe. But yeah, we need to pick up whatever they're doing to kind of put that in the UK.
Alicia, thanks very much indeed for calling in. First-time caller to LBC from Tottenham, who works in the NHS as a nurse on an oncology ward. Eric has texted in to say that Alicia's story is the reason why nurses should strike. And coming up after the news at 8:30, we are going to talk about a strike that is going to begin tomorrow by bus drivers in parts of London and Essex, more than 1,500 of them, who say they are being roasted in their cabs this summer. And I wonder if that isn't a portent for future industrial action across many other industries and sectors to come. We'll come back to your calls in just a second, but I want to get an update now on what's taking place in Stourbridge. As we reported just before 8 o'clock, a child and 3 firefighters have now been taken to hospital because of that wildfire that we've been reporting throughout the afternoon here on LBC. Let's go back to George Ike, LBC's Midlands reporter, who is at the scene for us. George, what can you tell us about this child and 3 firefighters being taken to hospital, but also more broadly, what progress, if any, is being made in bringing this situation under control?
The official communications are still quite unclear on this, Simon, but actually we've seen a lot less smoke rising behind me compared to around 4 hours ago, which can only be a good sign, really. The latest update tells us that this is now a fire that began in one place and is now several small wildfires on a number of roads throughout Stourbridge, including the golf club. The entire length of one road is on fire still at the moment. A number of roads are closed, and as you say, we have got that update about the condition of 3 firefighters who are in hospital. A child also been taken to hospital as a result of this fire, and 6 members of the public have been treated by paramedics for smoke inhalation. But also a number of roads remain closed. Trains are still disrupted here as well, and we're waiting for further updates on that. The fire service also say they're currently facing extreme levels of demand and say wherever you are in the West Midlands, please don't light any barbecues, don't light any garden fires that you might be doing, because they seriously do not have the capacity to deal with that right now. And we've also heard in the last half an hour or so, Simon, from Severn Trent Water. That's the water board for the Midlands and this area. And they say that they're experiencing no supply, poor pressure and discoloured water in this area. That is largely because of the amount of water that's being pulled from the fire hydrants to try and deal with this fire. So for those residents who haven't been evacuated, they're facing power cuts and a lack of water this evening.
Are you saying, George, that there's an entire stretch of one road there that is on fire? I mean, that would suggest that the fire brigade is in for quite a long night ahead of themselves.
Yeah, so that's Racecourse Lane from Norton Road to County Lane. The entire stretch of that road is on fire. And essentially what West Midlands Fire and Rescue have said in this update is, as fast as they put fires out, because the ground is so dry and it's been so hot today, the fires are reigniting. So essentially they're re-firefighting fires they've already put out.
George Ike, LBC's Midlands reporter, joining us from Stourbridge. Thanks very much indeed for that update, George. The ambulance service in the West Midlands has issued a statement saying, we are currently in attendance at a number of fires across the region. Please avoid affected areas where possible and allow emergency services to respond safely and effectively. If smoke is affecting your home, keep doors and windows closed as a precaution. We would ask the public to use 999 wisely and, where appropriate, consider whether other NHS services or sources of medical advice may be more suitable for their needs. That's coming from the ambulance service of the West Midlands, and the West Midlands Fire Service has issued very similar messages urging people to remain absolutely cautious and not to attend the scene of any of these blazes. They don't want people out there gawking at them. Later this hour, we're going to be crossing live to Lewes in East Sussex, where we now know that 2 people were seriously injured in a train derailment that took place this afternoon. And in a moment, we're going to be talking to a representative from the union whose bus drivers, 1,500 of them in North London, East London and parts of Essex, are going to go on strike tomorrow over the just extraordinary levels of heat that they are facing in their drivers' cabins. Lizzie has texted in from Kent to say, please spare a thought for police officers who have to wear stab-proof vests whilst out and about all day in this heat, going from call to call. It is utterly unbearable. Jimmy has texted in to say, Simon, I work from home with no option to go into the office as our head office is the best part of 300 miles away. It's been pretty sticky today. However, I don't think my company would be helpful for paying anything towards me having any air cooling systems built into the house other than a standard fan. Anita asks, why are you only focusing on the nurses? I'm sure doctors, surgeons, anaesthetists, porters, canteen staff, etc. are also suffering just as badly from the heat. And Anita, that's exactly the point that we were making in our interview with Patricia Marquis of the Royal College of Nursing and then Dr. Peter Carter as well. This isn't just about even the staff. It's also about the patients, and it is about the need to come up with a plan to deal with all of this. More of your calls, more of your texts. 0345 6060 973, same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones. You can also text 84850. It's Simon Marks in for Ian Dale with you until 10 o'clock tonight here on LBC. But now, with the time at exactly 8:30, the news headlines come from Daryl Jackson.
An entire street of houses in Stourbridge in the West Midlands is on fire this evening after a wildfire spread. A child and 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital. The West Midlands Fire Service says it's facing extreme levels of demand following a series of major incidents. It's been declared the hottest day of the year, with a temperature of 38.1 Celsius recorded in West London. 11 casualties have been reported following a train derailment near Lewes Station in East Sussex. 2 people have been seriously injured after a Southern Rail service from London's Victoria to Eastbourne came off the tracks. And a 102-year-old man with dementia has died just days after he was allegedly pushed off stage while complaining about noise at his local pub in South Wales. A 56-year-old was arrested on suspicion of assault and is under investigation. LBC weather, cloud and showers in Northern Ireland and Scotland tonight. Warm with clear spells again elsewhere. Lows of 15 degrees.
The LBC app. News your way. This is LBC.
Pick up more sun cream. Impromptu picnic. Late night cinema trip. Do more this summer. Hop on and off with the Weekend Hopper. Get unlimited weekend bus and tram journeys for £1.75 per day every Saturday and Sunday from the 25th of July. Plan your journey with the TfL Go app. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Offer valid from 4:30am on the 25th of July until 23:59 Monday the 31st of August. Always use the same card or device when touching in. For more information, search TfL Hopper.
At Waitrose, you know you're a food lover when 3 for £12 on a range of mix and match summer barbecue meant not only was the get-together a hit, but lunch the next day and the day after that. Make it a summer to remember with 3 for £12 on our delicious barbecue range, including citrus herby halloumi kebabs, smoky king prawns with a punchy Creole sauce, and juicy British oak smoked beef burgers. Available now at Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and partners and concessions.
Wrong tool for the job? Don't make that mistake with your van. Save thousands on selected new Toyota vans with a warranty up to 10 years or 100,000 miles with every qualifying routine service. Visit your nearest Toyota centre or visit toyota.co.uk/van savings for more details. Savings on selected vans ordered by the 30th of September 2026. UK residents, see toyota.co.uk for full details. T's and C's apply while stocks last.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with Simon Marks.
If you are a serving police officer and you're willing to talk about the experience that you had at work today, maybe out on the beat, I'd be very interested in hearing from you because Ethan has also texted the programme saying, can we also think about those police officers out in this heat with a stab-proof vest that can weigh around 5 kilograms? Can I also point out that they, unlike every other service, aren't able to strike? So I'd definitely be interested in hearing what that experience was like in the policing workplace today. I'm also interested if you are a chef or a cook and you are working in a kitchen in a restaurant or a hotel or other aspect of the hospitality sector, what has that been like today? Because I know from previous conversations that we've had, you can't really control the temperature in that workplace, even if you tried. So what's your view about the concerns that employees in other sectors are raising? You can call me at 0345 6060 973. We're going to come back to your calls in a moment. But first, as I said, I think there is a bit of a canary in the coal mine that we should be paying attention to, and it comes in the form of a strike that is beginning in a few hours' time. More than 1,500 bus drivers serving several routes in North London, East London and parts of Essex are walking off the job. They are taking several days of strike action over the next few weeks, accusing their employer, Arriva, of ignoring pleas for the company to invest in better systems to keep their members cool. The strikes are due to continue all the way through until late October. Arriva says the company is responding to the heat dispute by investing in longer-term solutions that include air conditioning upgrades and ongoing investments in a new bus fleet. But I wonder if this strike is the beginning of a new era of industrial action related to the heat. And joining me now on the programme is Stephen Stockwell, Regional Officer for Unite the Union, whose members are taking this action. Mr. Stockwell, thanks very much for being with us on LBC tonight. I have to tell you that I use one of the routes that is going to be impacted by this every single day. And I can tell you that for passengers, it's a pretty uncomfortable experience. And there is no question that for the drivers of many of those buses, I can't obviously speak to all of the Arriva buses, I mean, the temperatures in the cabs must be absolutely searing. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Simon. So, as it happens, we had ACAS Talks yesterday. While we were at ACAS Talks, a number of my reps sent me some pictures of thermometers that the drivers had taken in. So yesterday, 35-degree heat. We had everything 40 degrees, 42.6, 43.1 and 50.3 degrees yesterday. Today I had another picture sent that was 48.5 degrees in the cab. So the temperatures are literally unbearable for the drivers.
And the point I was making earlier is that as a passenger, I can at least get off when I get to my stop. How long are the drivers in those cabs continuously experiencing that kind of temperature?
So you could be on 4 or 5 hours as half of your duty. You can get out and have a cool-down break, but you get straight back in again. 10, 15, 20 minutes, you'd get back in, you'd be expected to re-drive. So there is no relief. The only relief is going to be actually fitting air conditioning that works within those cabs.
What are the demands that you're making?
So pretty much that is the ultimate demand is that we need aircon. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen overnight. It's not a click of your fingers. That's going to need a strategy and a structure to do so. The issue is that we've got an old fleet of buses that was old TfL spec that didn't have air conditioning. It had an air chilling system. So that doesn't cool the bus in the same way that an aircon system does. It only cools at 2 or 3 degrees below ambient. The problem is ambient is an air temperature. Ambient on a bus is what's the temperature of the tarmac in front of you, which is why the temperatures are so high in the bus.
And as part of this dispute, there's no pay claim that's being made by the drivers?
No, absolutely not. This is all about conditions of employment.
And how are talks at ACAS going? I mean, this strike is definitely happening, starting, I think, at 4 o'clock in the morning?
Tomorrow's strike, that will definitely happen. We're obviously still happy to meet the company. We're looking to meet again next week if we can, but we've got another 3 days of strike action planned for next week as well.
Do you think you're making any progress in those conversations?
I think the issue is we've had previous discussions with the employer. We went into dispute over a very similar issue the back end of 2023, start of 2024. We've had a number of meetings to try to resolve this, so this is at least 2.5 years in the making. The company can make promises, but what we need is a real firm schedule of work that's going to be done to call those buses.
And are there any short-term fixes that the drivers can engage in? And I suppose I'm also asking, are there any restrictions on what they're allowed to do? One listener has suggested bus drivers should be equipped with neck fans, which are supposed to be game-changing and inexpensive.
I think that person needs to sit in the cab of a bus. They've already got 2 fans. All the fan does is to circulate 40-degree air. So it doesn't actually cool anything. What we need is something to cool the air. So there may be temporary solutions and sticking plasters until the aircon can be fitted, perhaps some wicking clothing, perhaps some other devices, maybe some films on the screens of the buses to stop so much light coming in. But ultimately, it is all about aircon and cooling that cab.
And again, in terms of the demands that you're making, are you requiring them to give you a timetable for how long it's going to take for air conditioning to be installed on all of the vehicles that your members are driving? I mean, what exactly do you want them to commit to?
So obviously, as I say, they're not going to click their fingers and get aircon on every bus. What they need to do is to give us some kind of a strategy and a structure for getting aircon on the buses. As I understand it, there is so we've got a subcommittee of one of our London-wide committees is speaking with TfL. It's a Hot Bus Task Force, I believe it's called. They've mocked up air conditioning on one of their buses, a retrofit bus rather than a new bus. It appears to work, but it's got to go through a number of different tests and checks to be able to be authorised as a standard for the buses. So that's going to take time. If they give us some kind of a strategy and a structure for that, then that might be enough to calm members.
And just in terms of the trajectory of labour relations more broadly, do you think that this industrial action is a portent of more industrial action across other sectors that may follow, inevitably because of the climate change impacts that we're now witnessing summer after summer across the UK?
Yeah, I believe it may well be, Simon. I mean, what do people do if they're in excessively hot workplaces that can be managed, that can be controlled? As you mentioned a second ago about chefs. They're going to be in a kitchen where you've got burners in front of you. It's going to be virtually impossible to cool those locations. Things like a bus cab, they can. So I'd imagine that there will be other industries where they go, actually, we can't just keep working like this. I'm guessing it'll happen and you'll end up with more strikes. I mean, again, across London, there's 7 or 8 operators. You might end up with other operators saying, actually, we need to take on our employer as well.
Stephen Stockwell, thanks very much indeed for joining us this evening. Regional Officer for Unite the Union, whose members are taking this industrial action, starts at 4 o'clock in the morning. And if you are in North London, East London or Essex, you should definitely check and see whether your bus route is affected by this strike, because otherwise you are going to be out there standing in 35-degree heat at a bus stop tomorrow where no bus may be coming. Let's go back to the phones. Paul is in Worcester Park in London. Evening, Paul.
Hello there. I must say, I really do not understand why we have to whine and get so excited about what is basically just the weather. I really do find it really dreary. We've had a few days, a few weeks of hot weather. In a couple of weeks, it will all be over and everything will get back to normal. And just before I go back to what I do for a living...
Paul, it won't. It's not going to get back to normal. What is normal?
Well, in a few weeks' time, it's going to be September, and even if it's around about 2026, that will be like fine. But all this excitement over it, and I want to go back to what I do for a living and how I deal with that in a minute, but also, why is it that the NHS is always the go-to organisation to listen to people bleat? Why are they the most done by, and we have to care the most about how they're suffering? It's always the NHS, nurses and doctors, they're so...
Well, I think, Paul, when you're in a situation... I think when you're in a situation where nurses are collapsing in hospitals because of the working conditions that they're in, so that they end up having to be treated in the hospitals where they are supposed to be treating patients, that is certainly worthy of note.
Well, if they're collapsing in hospital, I really think they all sorts of fitness. I'm a landscaper. We have to work out under the sun as well as in the heat. I'm 68 years old. It's not nice. I don't like it. But it will come to an end. I mean, what do you expect? Do you expect perfect conditions for every day of your life?
No, of course not. But Paul, let's get real. You and I are both. You and I are both old enough to remember, not that many years ago, when there'd be a hot day in the UK, and the following morning the newspaper headlines would all read, "Britain sizzles in the 70s," because in those days we did it all in Fahrenheit, not in centigrade.
Yes.
Can you imagine a newspaper headline today reading, "Britain sizzles in the low 20s"? I mean, we were in the high 30s today. The world has changed, Paul.
There has no justification. Dealing with it. Listen, bus drivers and construction workers have worked in Morocco and India, in the Middle East, at these temperatures for centuries. The pyramids were built in these temperatures. We need to stop bleating about it, okay? Just get on with it. It's not nice. I don't like it, okay? So you have a few days or a few weeks of being uncomfortable, but just put up with it, get over it. I mean, like I'm saying to you, what do you expect? Perfect conditions?
No, I don't expect perfect conditions, but we do live in a technological age where, unlike the people who built the pyramids, we can do something about this, and we should do.
And maybe we will do in time. But why the continual moaning and bleating around it? Yes, it's not very nice.
I don't think it's moaning and bleating. I just don't think it's moaning and bleating, Paul. I think it's the stirrings of what needs to be a national conversation about what we're going to do about it.
Why does it need to be a national conversation? Why can't people look after themselves? Does everyone have to be a victim? You know, we're victim of the heat, we're victim of the cold, you know, we're victim of crime, we're victim of... we're not a victim of the sun. It's just uncomfortable and rather nasty. We don't need
we are a victim. We are a victim of human behaviour that has increased the ability of the sun to warm our country, and that's what we're dealing with. Paul, thank you very much indeed for calling in. Disagreements on the text about that. Gavin texted in to say, please cut the climate denier off, which I'm not going to do because I'm perfectly happy to have a conversation and engage in a bit of back and forth with Paul. David in Horsham says, Simon, Paul speaks for me. He is 100% correct. At last, some sanity. Simon Marks, in for Ian Dale. More of your calls and texts to come. It's 8:45.
LBC, this morning on Nick Ferrari at Breakfast.
Another series of catastrophic failures. Police and prosecutors missing numerous opportunities to stop killer and rapist Simon Levy. Helen Millerchap is director of the National Centre for Violence Against Women and Girls.
Serious lessons must come from this, knowing, as we do, that further harm could have been prevented.
Can I give you an indication of the frustration that gives my listeners? They hear that lessons will be learned without becoming too confrontational. Clearly they aren't.
Nick Ferrari at Breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
When your husband's got his heart set on making the doer upper open plan, enjoy every thudding second of it.
Yes!
Be a step ahead with Barclays Premier, with our exclusive mortgage rates. Barclays, backing your future. Eligibility criteria apply. All mortgages are subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply. New Barclays mortgage applications only.
With the birthday draw, Global and ITV give you the chance to win a life-changing £1 million. In fact, the birthday draw is the only weekly draw where you can win £1 million for just £1. So, enter before midnight on Sunday from as little as £1 or via post at thebirthdaydraw.com. Is it your lucky day? From Global and ITV. T&Cs apply. 18 plus UK only. No purchase necessary. Verify at thebirthdaydraw.com/verify.
Here we see a family completely asleep. No arguing, no bickering, not a peep. Remarkable. When you travel by train with Southeastern, you unlock 2-for-1 entry and great discounts at over 150 attractions across London, Kent and East Sussex, like London Zoo, the Cutty Sark and Dover Castle. Job done with 2-for-1. Terms and conditions apply. Search Southeastern Railway 2-for-1. Buy your train tickets direct and pay no booking fees.
At Waitrose, you know you're a food lover when the standout summer party spread even outshines the unfortunate weather. Make it a summer to remember with our delicious #1 summer range, including fresh Italian burrata with a creamy centre on a bed of sweet and tangy aubergine caponata and succulent aromatic coronation spatchcock with crispy Bombay spiced onions. Oh, available now at Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
This is LBC with Simon Marks.
Back in the 70s and the 80s, by the way, it wasn't just the fact that the headlines on the newspapers always used to read Britain sizzles in the 70s. And for those of you that don't remember Fahrenheit, that was 21 degrees centigrade. We also used to got sent out as cub reporters. We would go out and see if you could fry an egg on the pavement when the temperature was 75, maybe 79 degrees. I mean, that shows you how much things have changed over the course of the last 40 years. Let's go to Beth in West Malling in Kent. Good evening, Beth. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thanks. What would you like to say?
So my husband's a police officer for the Met, and during one of the recent heat waves, he was up in London policing one of the football celebrations, and he did a 15-hour shift in full riot gear with no break, no access to water or toilets. And, there's not really much they can do in those situations because the police need to be there. But I think it's a shame that they can't keep themselves safe while having to keep the public safe.
How did he describe that experience when he came home?
Exhausting.
And has he been back out there? Has he been back out there this week?
He's not been up in central London, but he's obviously in work still.
But, I mean, out on the streets or in an office environment? Out on the streets?
No, out on the streets, yeah.
And because even when he's out on the streets not in riot gear, he's still wearing a lot of gear and carrying a lot of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, thick trousers, shirts and stab-proof vests, which all come home very sweaty and very stinky.
And does he talk about whether there's a conversation going on among his mates and his colleagues about how much of this they can tolerate, or is it that they tolerate it because they've got no alternative but to tolerate it?
I think they tolerate it because there isn't another option.
Well, Beth, thank him for his service, and I wish him well as this particular heat wave continues. That's Beth in West Malling in Kent. We are going to go to Lewis in East Sussex now to get an update on the train derailment that took place there this afternoon. We know that at least 2 people were seriously injured and taken to hospital. No fatalities involved, but still a very nasty accident. The investigation continuing. I suspect emergency services still at the scene. Emma Core is joining us live from Lewis. Emma, it looks like you're out in front of the Lewis railway station. Is that right?
I am, yeah, that's exactly where I am, Simon. A very busy Lewis railway station this evening. In the last few moments, actually, I have seen a train pull in here and passengers get off, telling me that they have been on it for some time, a long wait. Obviously, there's massive rail disruption now after what happened this afternoon. And behind me as well, you can probably make out some coaches here doing rail replacement now as well to help ease the problems on the network. But just the latest on what happened this afternoon, just north of this station, Lewis Station, on the track that runs between here and Haywards Heath, a train derailed. This was the train, the 1424 Southern service from London Victoria to Eastbourne. Network Rail said that came off the tracks near to the station. 3 carriages from that train derailed, and we now know 11 people in total have been injured, 2 of them seriously injured. And emergency services, of course, have been working at the scene all afternoon for some hours, and all 150 passengers who were on board have now been safely evacuated. Such a huge emergency response to this, of course, as you'd expect. Fire crews, police officers, air ambulances down there as well. East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service said they deployed 10 fire engines to this incident and a command unit. And we've seen photos of what happened as well, Simon. Photographs on social media have shown passengers standing on top of some of these overturned carriages, and emergency crews working to reach those inside. One passenger who was travelling with his 6-year-old daughter, said what happened was pandemonium. The carriage appeared to jump forwards when the emergency brakes came on, throwing passengers forward. The British Transport Police, as you said now, of course there'll be an investigation alongside the Rail Accident Investigation Branch to establish exactly what happened. But in the meantime, of course, patients have been assessed and treated at some of the Sussex hospitals. University Hospital Sussex in Brighton has confirmed that it is responding to what's happened. But at the moment, it seems that all passengers have now got off safely. Those that have been injured, treated in hospital. And the Air Accident Investigation Branch, of course, the Rail Accident Investigation Branch, Simon, will now be, of course, looking into exactly what happened.
And there will, of course, be tremendous interest in what happened. I mean, we've certainly seen images, Emma, of a buckled rail, and quite a significantly buckled rail. And I think it is inevitable that because of the day on which this happened, the hottest day of the year that we've experienced, there's going to be an intensity of interest in the findings of that investigation, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's been 38 degrees here in Lewes. As I got out, earlier and was just walking around, started to get dark. It's still 30 degrees, 29 degrees here. So very, very, very hot. And we know what happens to rail tracks in this heat. As you say, they can buckle. Over in France, I know they've been investing in their rail network, trying to get it to manage sort of 50-degree temperatures. So there will be talks, of course, after what's happened here. Luckily, of course, no fatalities, but serious injuries, at how that could be prevented and what our rail network, what needs to be done to prevent anything like this happening.
Yep, too early to know what caused it, but as I say, much interest in that investigation as it gets underway. LBC Southeast of England correspondent Emma Corr joining us from Lewes Railway Station this evening, live on the programme. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Swansea. Paul is on the line from there. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening. Enjoy your show. Always.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
I'm just phoning in because listening to discussion about the climate and the need for air conditioning in hospitals, I'm thinking we're about to divert so much more money into defence, and we are already the 6th largest budget for defence in the world. So think of all the things that won't happen because of that those funds that get diverted.
Do you think that's a false economy, Paul? Or rather a false expenditure choice?
I think it's a false expenditure choice, yes. I think it makes us more unsafe, and I think it's promoting a myth about Russia's coming for us. They're not. They are bogged down in Ukraine, and I don't think they're coming for Western Europe or the UK. And we're going to be putting hundreds of billions more into defence, and hearing people like George Robinson, who's heading up NATO and is a representative, I might say, for a defence lobby group, and others singing for their supper, because that's what they're doing, is a dangerous narrative.
Paul, let me push back and suggest that it might not be promoting a myth, because it might be promoting the reality of the fact that we think we can no longer count on the United States for our security.
But my point is, Russia's not coming for us, OK? He might be interested, Putin might be interested.
But somebody else might come for us.
I don't think we need to be spending hundreds of billions more to defend ourselves.
And you would earmark as much of that money as possible to use in the battle against climate change?
And other things, yeah. I mean, infrastructure generally. I mean, we've got crumbling schools, crumbling hospitals, and even before we talk about air conditioning for hospitals, we need housing to house people, who are homeless, lots of people living in B&Bs, families in one room, people existing out of food banks. These are all things that need money. Councils need fair funding from central government. They need money for those things, not ever bigger spends into the military-industrial complex.
Which is another reason, Paul, why we need a big, all-encompassing national conversation, don't we?
Well, I'd agree on that, especially when it's around climate and about
government expenditure. I mean, what was that number that we just heard from Dr. Carter? There's £13.8 billion worth of maintenance issues within hospitals that haven't been fixed, dating back years. 13.8 billion quid.
Well, yeah, that's the point I'm getting at, really. But we're going to be diverting the kind of money that's necessary to fix those things, and it's not just hospitals. As I've said, schools and homes to house homeless people, things like that. We do need that national conversation.
We
My
do.
point is it's not going to happen with increased defence funding.
Fair enough, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. Paul in Swansea. Let's finish the hour by talking to Adam in Dartford. Evening, Adam.
Hello there, evening. I think it's a great programme. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for calling.
It summarised the whole problem in a nutshell. You've got half the callers ringing up saying, people like Caroline Lucas and everyone else, climate emergency, what's the government going to do, banning barbecues isn't enough, people are drilling for oil, it's everyone's fault, Donald Trump's fault, whoever's fault it is, it's everyone's fault but our own fault. And in fact, it's probably all our individual faults, the climate crisis. And the answer is, let's put air conditioning in everything. And can anyone think of what the carbon footprint and the energy costs and the gases and the transistors and the rare earths to give, 20 million houses or hospitals or whatever, air conditioning units? It's just totally nonsensical. What we're really saying, is it's everyone else's fault, the problem, but we don't like the inconvenience of it, so we'll add to the carbon footprint to make ourselves feel a bit more comfortable in this hot
So
weather.
what would you do instead, Adam?
Well, I don't know. I just think it summarises the problem. I think that you cannot fight the climate crisis under any circumstances by adding millions of air conditioning units, which by default will all coming in from China, all the components, the servicing, the gases. I mean, it'll just make the climate position really worse.
Yes, I mean...
I think it just sums up the dichotomy, the sort of, it's everyone else's fault when it's all our own faults, and we're not prepared to put up with the inconvenience of trying to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more than just putting up with inconvenience at this point. I mean, I think if you look at what has reportedly been taking place in hospitals over the last 24 hours, that suggests that it's more than inconvenience. But Adam, thank you very much indeed for contributing to our programme, and that brings our conversation about the climate tonight to an end. We'll obviously be coming back to it. But in our final hour together tonight, we're going to talk about something related, really. It's the water companies. They've been given the green light today to raise bills for customers by another £3.4 billion to deal with increased pressures on critical infrastructure and to clean up the environment. The Prime Minister today accused the water companies of treating their customers like a bottomless source of funding and said that he was angry over the proposed price rises. Environmentalists called Ofwat's decision an insult. Recent polling says 82% of you believe the water companies should be taken back into public ownership. The Tories disagree, but isn't this news today the final straw?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, multiple houses are on fire in Stourbridge this evening in the West Midlands after a wildfire spread. LBC's Midlands reporter George Ike is on the scene for us.
So that's Racecourse Lane from Norton Road to County Lane. The entire stretch of that road is on fire. And essentially what West Midlands Fire and Rescue have said in this update is, as fast as they put fires out, because the ground is so dry and it's been so hot today, the fires are reigniting. So essentially they're re-firefighting fires they've already put out.
Well, Joe lives nearby and has been speaking to LBC.
When it first went off, I went up the road just to see what was going on. And there was just short of, I'd say, about 30 fire engines. And that was only about 15 minutes after I first smelt the smoke and saw the smoke. My house, thankfully, is okay. There's a lot of smoke over there and a lot of debris from the fire. But I have a few friends who live in the close proximity to where the fire started. And a lot of them have been evacuated from their homes, unfortunately.
A child and 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital. Well, also in the West Midlands, a major incident has been declared due to a large fire in Stratford-upon-Avon. West Midlands Fire Service says it's facing multiple incidents this evening. Well, all this as temperatures today of 38.1 Celsius were recorded at Kew Gardens in London. It makes it provisionally the hottest day of the year so far, with the UK seeing its 5th heatwave of 2026. In other news this evening, 11 casualties have been reported following a train derailment near Lewes Station in East Sussex. 2 people have been seriously injured after a Southern Rail service from London's Victoria to Eastbourne came off the tracks. Well, LBC's correspondent Emma Core is at Lewes train station this evening.
150 passengers who were on board have now been safely evacuated. Such a huge emergency response to this, of course, as you'd expect. Fire crews, police officers, air ambulances. We've seen photos of what happened as well. Photographs on social media have shown passengers standing on top of some of these overturned carriages.
Harvey Nichols has been brought out of administration. Mike Ashley's Frasers Group is taking over the department store chain. And the UK economy unexpectedly grew in June. GDP rose by 0.3%, despite economists predicting a flat performance. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 60 points at 10,733. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.17. LBC weather, cloudy with showers in Northern Ireland and Scotland tonight. Warm and clear elsewhere, a low of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
I'm in for Ian Dale, and in our remaining hour together tonight, we are going to talk about the future of the country's water companies, because you will have been, I am sure, outraged to learn today that Ofwat, the regulator, has given them the green light to fleece you for another £3.4 billion over the next few years. The money is supposed to be used to address pollutants, replace pipes, build treatment plants and establish 9 new reservoirs. That deal for those 9 new reservoirs was agreed by Sir Keir Starmer's government with the water companies, and they will be our first new reservoirs in the UK for 30 years. So we could dig into that a little bit if you like, but we all know that the water companies bear significant responsibility for polluting the country's lakes, rivers and coastal waters, in some cases trousering extraordinary amounts of profits, awarding their executives massive bonuses. The Prime Minister said today that he is angry over Ofwat's decision. He said the water companies are treating customers like a blank cheque and said they should stop viewing consumers as a bottomless source of funding. Where water companies seek to pass unnecessary costs onto households, they will be challenged, he said. As you know, he's thinking of taking water companies at least partly back into public ownership. Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, said today that is not the solution. She said public ownership will not magic up more money, lower bills or improve the infrastructure. It will just leave taxpayers on the hook for billions of pounds. She says the regulator needs to be more empowered instead. 82% of you told a poll in May that you favour taking the water companies back into public ownership. That was May. Now it's August. The water companies given the green light by Ofwat to increase bills by another £3.4 billion over the next few years. Isn't that for you the final straw? I suspect it hardens your resolve to bring water companies back into public ownership and to stop private companies that own them currently from earning fortunes and then fleecing you even more. But you can tell me what you think at 0345 6060 973. It is the same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones. You can text 84850. And to help us dig into this conversation tonight, I'm joined now by Dr. Heather Smith, Senior Lecturer in Water Governance at Cranfield University. Dr. Smith, thanks very much indeed for being with us on the programme. Can I ask you, first of all, were you surprised today by this Ofwat decision, or was it always going to come through this way? Were the clouds already seeded, if you'll pardon the pun? Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, I think the groundwork had been laid for this for some time. I think what's interesting about this new funding that's been approved is that it's happening within a price review period. So normally the water companies, their spending is regulated over 5-year periods. But in this one, they felt that there was the need to adjust within the period in order to allow for new costs that hadn't been foreseen at that time. And that's the first time they've done this. So it's a way of allowing for extra costs to support infrastructure and critical infrastructure that weren't foreseen when the price review was done a few years ago.
Can you explain the governance and the structure here? We've got a question from Sarah in Putney. She's just texted in and she says, Simon, who has allowed the failing, greedy, corrupt water companies to increase our bills even further? Why do continuous governments act supine when they should be fighting for our interests, especially during a cost of living crisis? It's outrageous. What's the answer to Sarah's very on-point question?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's an awful lot of sentiment in that question. If I stick to the actual question in terms of what's been allowed here, I mean, this is very much under the governance of the regulator. So that's, in this case, is Ofwat. So Ofwat governs what the water companies are allowed to spend and how much they're allowed to charge customers and pass some of those costs, which again are to support infrastructure and investments in things like new resources for data centers. I think that was one of the things that was mentioned. And how much they decide how much of that gets passed on to customers and how much has to come from other sources.
But Andy Burnham doesn't have the power to pick up the phone, or John Healey, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, doesn't have the power to pick up the phone and say to the head of Ofwat, you can forget that idea.
Well, the Ofwat is under the remit of DEFRA, so technically that would fall to the Secretary of State for DEFRA. I'm sure the Prime Minister could make wishes known to those secretaries, and Ofwat is meant to be an independent regulator, so they are at arm's length from the government, but ultimately they are accountable to the Secretary of State for DEFRA.
When Andy Burnham says today, where water companies seek to pass unnecessary costs onto households, they will be challenged. Do we know what that means?
Well, I think the key word there is unnecessary. And I think the debate, I think, is around to what extent costs such as this are, in fact, necessary. The Prime Minister has made it quite clear that he supports a lot of house building and he's supportive of investment in data centers for AI. Those things need water. And some of the investments that have been allowed under this new scheme are for those things. So it seems a little odd to me that he would then challenge the infrastructure that is necessary to support things like house building and data centers and such.
Right. I mean, and it's not even clear, what his definition is of unnecessary costs there, as you were pointing out. We've got another question from a listener who says she's got he or she, I can't see from the name here. Genuine question. Do other countries have privatised water?
So that's a really interesting question. The kind of privatized system that we have is quite rare, in that the water companies actually own all of the assets, including the pipes and the treatment plants and all that. In a lot of European countries, the infrastructure is publicly owned, but they often have private operators. So a bit like the way our train companies work, I guess. But the system of private ownership is not that common. But in thinking about other countries, it's also important to look at whether or not those countries that do have public systems actually have the same challenges that we do. And in fact, they do. So there's no evidence that our privatized system has done anything worse than other countries that have public systems that are facing the same problems.
Well, you've foreseen my next question, which is there any evidence to suggest that governments do a good job of running water companies?
Well, as you might imagine, it's a very mixed bag. There are some that are very well run. There are some public systems that are very poorly run. Take one of our near neighbours, say Ireland. Irish Water is a public company. One of the things that often gets mentioned about water companies here is the leakage rates. Irish Water, their leakage rates are somewhere around 40%, which is much higher than a lot of the English companies have. So for things like this, you can pick on various different performance metrics, but often the public companies deal with the exact same challenges that the private companies do. There's no evidence that they inherently perform any better.
And can I put to you finally what the leader of the opposition here, Kemi Badenoch, said today? A hike in water bills is the last thing the public need when they're already struggling with Labour's cost of living crisis. If we're going to fix the water industry, we need stronger regulation to stop water companies racking up huge debts, better management by the regulator, and long-term infrastructure investment. Would a more empowered and stronger Ofwat necessarily do a better job?
Well, it's very difficult to say. Obviously, we're awaiting the new changes to the regulator that were proposed under the Cunliffe inquiry, and that was going to be a new kind of super regulator, I suppose. So we're still waiting to see what that might look like. I think it's important to distinguish between two things that the Prime Minister has talked about: public control and public ownership, and they are not the same thing. You can have greater public control without the need to resort to public ownership. And greater public control could be in the form of a stronger regulator, greater transparency between what the companies are doing and what the regulator is doing, and more oversight of the company's activities. So that is entirely possible.
So there's not necessarily that much daylight between what Andy Burnham is saying when he talks about bringing water and energy into public control and what Kemi Badenoch is saying, where she says you need a stronger regulation and better management by the regulator?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of room for maneuver in those terms, as you can imagine. But yeah, control could be a form of stronger regulation. You know, it is possible to exert greater control over what activities are spent, how what information is reported, what goals are achieved, what targets are set. It's possible to get more control over those things from the government without having to go to ownership.
Really interesting. Dr. Smith, thank you so much for joining us. You always break these things down so brilliantly when we talk about water. Dr. Heather Smith, Senior Lecturer in Water Governance at Cranfield University. So here's the question. Do you want the water companies to be nationalised? Do you want them to be taken back into public ownership? Or do you want what sounds like it might be half a loaf from Andy Burnham, bringing water and energy companies under a greater degree of public control? Do you want the government to go all the way, let's go back to an era in which utility companies were nationally owned? Or do you want to strengthen the control over a system that currently exists? Let me know what you think at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850, which is what Julie has done. She says, if the water companies increase our bills, I will delay paying my bill each month. That's Julie in Wimbledon. Kenny has texted in to say, water. I moved into a small abode 7 years ago. The water bill was £80 or thereabouts twice a year. This year it is £148 for 6 months, and the water boss got a pay rise of 80,000 quid. Let me know what you think. It's Simon Marks in for Ian Dale on LBC. The time is 9:15.
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m.
With voting underway in the Clacton by-election, join me from 10 for all the very latest news and analysis, plus concern over the workers staying at home because it's too hot. Is that a good enough excuse? And talking of feeling the heat, the music star in his 60s under pressure over his 19-year-old girlfriend. But has he actually done anything wrong?
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Pick up more sun cream. Impromptu picnic. Late night cinema trip. Do more this summer. Hop on and off with the Weekend Hopper. Get unlimited weekend bus and tram journeys for £1.75 per day every Saturday and Sunday from the 25th of July. Plan your journey with the TfL Go app. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Offer valid from 4:30am on the 25th of July until 23:59 Monday the 31st of August. Always use the same card or device when touching in. For more information, search TfL Hopper.
When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you.
Life feels better with a smile. Banning Dental Group Clinics. Modern, comfortable and affordable dentistry for all. See online for our price match promise. Keep on smiling.
Keep on smiling, keep on smiling, and the whole world smiles with you.
Dental.co.uk.
Shots from halfway causing goalkeeping howlers. Roofs badly leaking from sudden rain showers. Saturday hackers and onion sizzling. These are a few of our favourite things. When you're singing yet not winning. When your bet's gone bad. We simply remember our favourite things. And then we'll feel so glad.
For all your favourite things, visit BetVictor. 18+, gambleaware.org. Please gamble responsibly.
Simon Marks on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Just to tell you a little bit more about that poll that was conducted back in May by YouGov, 82% of people believed that water companies should be run in the public sector, with only 8% favouring the status quo where water providers are private companies. And that puts the water sector on a par with schools, the NHS, the armed forces and the police, which between 83 and 89% of Britons believe should be run by the state. Only single-digit proportions, 3 to 6% of you, in that poll conducted in May, said you wanted to see water run in the private sector. So what do you think tonight after this news that Ofwat has given the green light to the water companies to charge you another £3.4 billion? £3.4 billion, that's obviously collectively shared out among all of you over the next few years. Let's talk to Sebastian in Harrow. Evening, Sebastian.
Good evening, Simon. How are you?
I am very well, thanks. How are you doing? I'm in a lovely air-conditioned studio, so I'm just fine.
I'm very envious. But anyway, so what about this water? What I would say that this, because it's owned by a private company or with shareholders, how does a company normally raise funds? They go and give shares. They distribute shares. They have a new share distribution. And then they sell those shares, and that's how they collect money. They don't go knocking on the government and say, "Can we have some money from your customers, please?" And that for that kind of reasoning, why hasn't Ofwat? If I could think of it, I'm sure Ofwat could. And how much does it cost to run Ofwat? And if that was disbanded and the water boards will come back to the government, we'd be saving that money too. And then we'd get elected governments who are pushed to deal with issues like this, especially with climate change coming on.
But hang on a second. If you disbanded Ofwat, I mean, the industry has to have a regulator, doesn't it?
But what we've seen with Ofwat, yes, we do need a regulator, and that should be inbuilt into every government department anyway. Every government department have to have some checks and balances of how the money is spent within those departments. But what I'm trying to say is, all I've heard all my life since Ofwat came on board was, they don't have any teeth, they can't do anything, they roll over when pushed. But these are the kind of stories you hear if you check back in the past. I think my memory serves me correctly. But that is something that Ofwat needs to be changed for that reason as well. Is if they're allowing, what's the reasoning for them to have 3.2 billion shoved over onto us?
Absolutely. I mean, but what do you make of Kemi Badenoch's argument that actually what you really need to do is empower and strengthen the regulator?
I think these are easy things to say for an opposition leader, and these kind of things come quite easily. But when you have somebody in government like Boris Johnson and people like that have come through, they say a lot of things, but they don't actually follow through. And the opposite becomes the truth, i.e., we're being charged even more for services, or even different countries' business owners come and actually bid for the contracts, and they other outside organisations are running our water. Who do we complain to, even in a legal framework?
And can I ask you, when you heard Andy Burnham today saying that he was angry about this, The water companies are treating customers like a blank cheque. Where water companies seek to pass unnecessary costs onto households, they will be challenged. What do you think he's saying there?
I think he's saying he's using nice words, but when they are challenged, they will be taken to the cleaners. I think we can actually count on him, taking root and branch analysis of why they're actually operating the way they are, and they've got to come up with the answers. Otherwise, they literally will be taken over by the government. Make the shares actually drop in value, and the government can pick them up for nothing.
Yes, well, that's a very interesting thought, isn't it? Sebastian, thanks very much indeed for calling in tonight from Harrow. Mark has texted in to say, I would opt for public ownership, not stop at public control. The reason is we can then merge the many water companies, reducing executive salaries paid by only having one set of executives. And also, we'd be able to cap their salaries and allowances based on quality of life targets. We can ensure that the profits are either reinvested into the infrastructure or remain in the country, such as UK pensions and investors, rather than the current situation of profits leaving the country for foreign-owned companies, investors and pensions. And Mark goes on to say, maybe it won't make a difference to the bills or to how the water organisation is run, but it makes it more likely that we, the people, own the water and reap the benefits of the performance of water companies by encouraging better infrastructure and quality of life. Let's see what Chris thinks. Chris is in Whitworth in Lancashire this evening. Evening, Chris.
Good evening. I am a customer of United Utilities, and the boss of United Utilities has had a pay rise from £1.5 million a year to £2.5 million a year.
And that makes you feel?
Flaming mad.
I don't have the figures in front of me, Chris. I have no reason we've apparently looked it up, and you are spot on, apparently.
Yeah.
It's
just disgusting.
It's staggering, isn't it? On a day in which you're being told, buy off what, you've got to cough up more money to pay for improved infrastructure and for pollutants in rivers and waterways to be cleaned up.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the United Utilities are responsible for Windermere being full of, I couldn't use the wrong word, but very dirty, so we'll put it that way. And all the rivers in the northwest are all full of excrement and all sorts. And yet the boss gets a rise. Anybody listen to this, I think, is that really true? It is true. And yet you think it can't be right, but it is right.
What do you want? What do you want the government to do about it?
Privatise the whole thing. I'm old enough to remember what it was like when it was run by the government. When it's run by the public sector, people are on civil service pay levels. They're probably on $150,000 a year for running it for part of the public sector, and they had to follow the rules. They didn't have to make profits for the shareholders. They had to follow the rules, and everyone was proud of the fact that there were fish back in the Thames, and now there's no fish in the Thames anymore. So I can't say to myself, right, I don't like the way she's got a pay rise, I'll go somewhere else for my water. It's not as if there's a competition for it. The same company you can't choose between companies, can you? That's where privatisation was a mistake in the first place. Privatisation was supposed to bring about competition. How the hell can it with a monopoly?
Yeah, I mean, there is competition in some places in some parts of the country. I know where I live, there's a bit of competition between at least two water companies, but you've got none there, right?
No. They got the whole of the Northwest United Utilities, and I mean, I know personally how they waste water. Well, they waste money, they waste water, but they also waste money. I had a problem with my water meter, and 3 times people came to knock on my door. I've come to change the meter, and I had to say, no, it's been changed. I had to turn my tap on to make sure it's working. 3 times that. How much did that cost? So it's terrible.
And picking up on that point, I've been talking a lot over the last few weeks about this realisation that by the year 2050, we are going to be, as a nation, 5.2 billion litres of water short of our needs every single day.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
if you just plugged the leaks that are taking place across the system now, you could account for half of that shortage.
But the point is, with privatised companies, the duty is to the shareholders first, not to the customers. So they don't want to spend the money because that means they're going to pay smaller dividends. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you very much indeed for calling in. Louise Beardmore is the boss of United Utilities, which, as Chris was saying, supplies water for the North West. Her salary in the last financial year went up by £1.1 million to a total of £2.5 million. United Utilities is owned by thousands of shareholders rather than any one big company. But the American investment company BlackRock is the biggest shareholder at around 12% of the company. Now, one of our listeners, Emma, has texted in to say, what is the water system like in the States? Is it publicly owned? Is the average bill about the same as the UK or less or more? I am interested to know. And the answer to that question, Emma, is complicated. Water in the United States is not entirely privatised. About 85% of Americans receive their drinking water and wastewater services from publicly owned and operated municipal utilities. However, private companies do manage systems or own some utilities in specific regions via private ownership or public-private partnerships. But what we've just discovered, basically, is that United, which is BlackRock, this big American investment firm, has got a stake in it. They've got a stake in a private water company operating in the UK at a time when 85 to 90% of Americans receive their drinking water and wastewater services from publicly owned and operated municipal utilities. And as for the costs, you have just reminded me, Emma, that I have not paid my water bill in Washington, D.C. for my home back in the US. And I can look it up right now because, bizarrely, every month the bill comes in on email and it goes to my spam folder. I can't stop it from going to my spam folder. So let me tell you what I am paying for last month's water in Washington, D.C. This is a monthly bill. $120.24 for a month. So that's about £95 to £100 for a family home. I mean, I've been here. There's only been my wife and my son in the house for the last month. And that's costing us about, £90 for a month. And I'd say that's pretty much on par for what we pay. And when I get home, I'll have to make sure that I pay it because I wouldn't want them to get it cut off, would I? Thanks for asking, Emma. Very interesting question. After the news, I'm going to touch on a big scandal in the country, which I think has stirrings of the post office scandal. Thousands of retired civil servants are still unable to receive their pensions because the pension scheme was outsourced to a private company and the outsourcing has gone wrong. I'm going to be joined by a union leader who represents thousands of civil servants who can't get their hands on their cash. And then we'll talk more about the water companies. It's 9:30 here on LBC. The news headlines come from Daryl Jackson.
Multiple houses are on fire in the West Midlands tonight after an extensive wildfire spread in Stourbridge. A child and 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital. The region's fire service says it's facing extreme levels of demand following a series of incidents. 2 people are seriously injured after a train derailed near Lewes in East Sussex. About 150 people were on board the train when it derailed shortly before 4 p.m. this afternoon. And a temperature of 38.1 degrees Celsius has been recorded at Kew Gardens in London. It makes it provisionally the hottest day of the year so far, with the UK seeing its 5th heatwave of 2026. LBC weather, cloud and showers in Northern Ireland and Scotland tonight. Warm and clear elsewhere, a low of 15 degrees.
This is LBC.
Nothing like a good run at the coast, but I better head back. I think there's a shortcut across that rock. OK, don't panic, float to live. Head back, breathe and relax.
Coast Guard, someone's in trouble in the water.
OK, help's on its way.
Urea. Floating saved my life.
In an emergency at the coast, call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard. And please, respect the water.
Serious about the right vitamins for you and your family? Trust Vitabiotics, the UK's #1 vitamin company for expert nutritional care for every age and lifestyle. Vitamins for everyone, including well man, well woman, well baby and well kid. From Boots, pharmacies and vitabiotics.com. For #1 verification, see vitabiotics.com.
Take Irish ferries from Dover to Calais, where your pet travels in the pet lounge. You'd be barking not to. Irish ferries. See travel differently.
At Waitrose, you know you're a food lover when the delicious 3 for £8 deli spread is what you remember from the garden party rather than why you were having it in the first place. Make it a summer to remember with 3 for £8 on our Moorish deli range, including creamy mozzarella balls with fresh basil pesto and pine nuts, juicy black garlic chorizo with wildflower honey, and aromatic Thai green chicken meatballs. Available now at Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected stores online, subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and Partners and concessions.
Simon Marks on LBC. Text 84850.
I have proof that I need to move to another Washington because Milton has texted in. He says, "Hello, Simon. I'm a Brit living on Long Island. I pay approximately $50 every 3 months for my water, and he lives in a town called Port Washington, and the water supply is municipal. In other words, it's publicly owned. So I'm not quite sure why I'm paying $120 a month in Washington, D.C. I think I might move to Long Island and report from Port Washington and just still call it Washington." Milton, thank you very much for texting in, and thank you for listening to LBC all the way over in Long Island. We're going to get back to more of your calls on the future of the water industry and whether you want it fully taken back into public ownership in a moment. But first, I want to lift the lid on a story that I don't think is getting enough national attention. And for those people caught up in it, it is a scandal that is threatening to wreck their plans and in some cases upend their lives. Thousands of retired civil servants and plenty of civil servants still in work who are thinking of retiring are having their lives turned upside down because they're not receiving their pension payments. At one point, 120,000 civil servants were affected by this. Many of them say they've become forgotten people as the government promises to fix the problem with dispersing the cash, but has not yet succeeded in doing so. It's all been caused when the civil service pension scheme was transferred from one outsourced operator, MyCSP, to another one, Capita. Tens of thousands of people tonight are still waiting for a quote, even as Capita says it is making progress to chip away at the backlog. And joining me now is Mike Clancy, the General Secretary of Prospect, a union that represents engineers, managers, scientists and other specialists in both the public and private sectors. Mike Clancy, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme tonight. I first heard about this a few months ago from some friends who work in the civil service. I had no idea this was going on. I think it's significantly underreported. Has any progress actually been made over the course of the last, 2 or 3 months in bringing this to any kind of conclusion? Because my understanding is that it's causing massive dislocation for a substantial number of both retired civil servants and some people who are still working because they don't want to retire unless they know they're going to be able to access their pension. Good evening.
It's a scandal of epic proportions, and it's good to be able to highlight it again on your show this evening. I mean, you've noted already that this commences with a disastrous outsourcing to MyCSP, and then a situation where the government, the current government, had little or no choice but to take a huge risk, which has also proved to be a gamble too far, by transferring it to Capita. And all along, this is an indictment of badly thought through outsourcing. And it's ironic, it's on a day when there are different, the usual media outlets covering questions of civil service and public service efficiency and questioning it. This is an indictment of private sector inefficiency and an outsourcing that should never have happened in the first place. Now, in terms of progress, progress is limited. The Capita have missed the deadlines that had been set, or they've set themselves in terms of the end of June. There's a further deadline they're talking about in September, but there's little or no confidence that will be met. There's a remediation advisor, a grand title for Grant Thornton, who are looking at whether they're going to be able to meet the terms of the contract. And as we speak, if there is any progress, it's only actually because there's been 140 additional civil servants drafted in to try to support the contract. So this is, as you've said, and I repeat, a scandal of epic proportions and an indictment of the previous government and to some extent the current one in terms of the choices it faced towards the end of last year and where we are now.
And can you explain what all this means in concrete, practical terms for your members?
So, first of all, the civil service is going through a constant change programme where it is looking to reduce its size. People need quotes to decide whether they may accept redundancy terms and what that means for their pension at that point in time. That has all been hampered because how can you make that choice without the numbers you would want to rely upon to finance yourself in retirement or as a bridge to another employment if you're still in the labour market? It basically means that there have been horrendous examples of hardship for people. Now, whilst this government, it is to be applauded, has put in place a loan scheme that doesn't apply to those who retired or left before 2025, it doesn't apply to dependents in certain circumstances, and basically means, if your readers think about it, people going without income for months on end, and all of the anxiety and the terrible cases that we've had to deal with, and indeed the civil servants now drafted in are dealing with, where people have lost a spouse, waiting to be paid, meeting expenses, sometimes funeral expenses, and the cases are quite harrowing. And that's why it is probably one of the greatest scandals, and when the history is written of this time, it will be a terrible indictment. So it's hardship, it's anxiety, and it's fear for the future that this has caused in so many people.
I mean, as I said in the introduction, it feels to me almost a bit like the post office scandal, especially in the manner in which it just doesn't get very much attention. And then, of course, when the post office scandal, got attention, things took off. I mean, it seems extraordinary that you can have thousands and thousands of people with no access to their money, and it just is not sort of ringing a bell in the public, in the town square.
Well, I think that's because public servants are often in the media pilloried as comfortable, not working hard enough, and not operating in the public interest. And therefore, maybe the sympathy amongst citizens more generally who are going through their own cost of living challenges for people not receiving their pension from public service may be diminished. But what really you've got to hang on to is that previous government was really committed to private sector efficiency, theoretically, in public service provision. I heard you mention the water industry. Public utilities in private hands are in question in people's minds right now. And this is just another example of it. What is needed in this space is a deep knowledge of complex pension schemes. That doesn't come through outsourcing to people who will make a promise they can do X, Y, and Z, and then they'll fail in the contract. And also the problem is there's very few private sector providers who could do this work. So it's not a real competition. The government admitted as much when it was facing the difficulties of my CSP, that there were very few people other than Capita who already had a poor record in this space that they could hand this over to. So what we're asking for is the contract to be run to its terms, that if it's appropriate to fine Capita, that the government should do so, that we need to look at in the medium term the ability to go to an insourcing and a consistent provision. In the short term, we have to make sure that Capita runs this contract and provides the resources into it to get people through the system. And it's not just the people who are retiring. I think you've partly hinted at this as well. There's around 1 million people who are ex-civil servants or deferreds and so on in the different schemes, who are actually getting a poor service, long waits on call centres. So this is a complete mess all round. It's most acute for the people who are going without now, but it's a general indictment, as I've said several times in this interview, of the whole outsourcing process that the previous government went through in this space, and indeed in others.
Mike Clancy, I'm enormously grateful to you. Thanks for your time tonight. General Secretary of Prospect, a union that represents engineers, managers, scientists and other specialists in both the public and private sectors. Capita, in a statement, has said, despite the progress made to date, we recognise the service has not been good enough, particularly for members waiting on bereavement, retirement and quotation cases, and we are sorry for the distress and inconvenience experienced by those members. We now have the processes, automation and technology in place to work through the backlog. I think it's a story we need to keep a very close eye on because, as I say, this has been going on for a very long time. And as Mr. Clancy indicated there's a connection between that and the conversation that we're having about the water companies and whether you want the water companies to be nationalised. Let's go to Glyn in Eastbourne on the phones tonight. Evening, Glyn. What do you think?
Simon, hi. I phoned to talk about Ofwat, but following your previous conversation, I work until I retired. I worked for the NHS, and before that I worked for myself as a consultant stroke contractor for the central government, all sorts of different departments, including DEFRA, the Home Office, etc. The problem is the government generally are absolutely rubbish at managing contracts. We would procure a contract and the terms are there in black and white, and you'd go back 6 months later, it had all gone pear-shaped, just like this Capita thing, and you would find out the reason being that nobody had actually ever looked at the contract that had been signed up to by the winning bidder, and invoked the terms of that contract.
So, Glyn, are you one of the civil servants affected by this?
No, I'm not. No.
But do you?
No, not at all.
But do you know people who are?
Yes, I do. But I know generally this is caused not by bad procurement, because the procurement is run completely compliantly. It's run by abysmal contract management, where people do not use the contract. They allow the likes of Capita, KPM, all the other big agencies to get away with it and not supply what they're supposed to supply, not deliver what they're supposed to deliver under the terms of the contract.
OK, so now take this to the water industry, and what was the point that you were going to make about that? Because I think they're related.
Yeah, they're absolutely related. So Ofwat, I'm not sure. I'll be honest, I don't. Are they a government department? Are they a non-governmental department? I'm not sure.
Well, they come under DEFRA, and they're supposed to be statutorily independent. They're an independent regulator.
However, again, they are there to do a job. We've got a Prime Minister who doesn't have the round things to pick them up and say, "Oi, this I'm not putting up with."
Well, I think we don't know that yet, because he said today he was angry.
Well, that really gives me an awful lot of confidence. He's angry. Yeah, I'm shaking in my boots that he's angry. What's he going to do about it? Now, I hate to mention the Thatcher word, but Maggie Thatcher would have pulled them up, dragged them in by their bootstraps and said, "Get it flaming."
Yeah, well, I think, you see, that is the kind of approach that Kemi Badenoch is proposing. Andy Burnham, however, as you know, is thinking about taking the industry back into public ownership.
Well, I don't think that's a good idea. I think they need more governmental management
and control.
I'm old enough and ugly enough to remember when everybody was saying, "Oh, get the railways back under, outsource the railways, privatise the railways. British Rail is a load of rubbish." But it can't get any worse. And guess what? It did.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is the key question, Glyn. Does the government know how to manage the water industry better than the water industry is currently being managed? That, you can argue, is a very, very low bar. But as we heard at the beginning of the programme of this hour from Dr. Heather Smith, there are some parts of the world where water is publicly owned and it has not been particularly successfully operated and managed. Lots more of your calls to come. Simon Marks in for Ian Dale on LBC. It's 9:45.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
As polls close in the Clacton by-election, join me for all the very latest reaction and analysis. Plus, more wildfires tear through homes in the Midlands. Is the government taking this seriously enough?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
How does a $20 golf gadget end up being used as a bomb detector in war zones worldwide? I'm Alice Levine, and this is Explosive Lies. the podcast exposing a scam that fooled governments and security services across the globe. Open our free Global Player app and search Explosive Lies to start listening today.
Switch it up this summer with Ford. Take to the streets with looks that thrill. Complete a test drive in August and you could get up to £1,500 off with our Welcome to Ford promotion and discover other offers across the range. Search Ford Test Drive event to book and find out more. Steal the scene this summer. Ready, set, Ford. Available to customers looking to switch to Ford or upgrade an older Ford model. New cars registered by the 30th of September.
Hi, Nan. We're having a brilliant time. We went to a theme park and the rides were awesome. We got money off the entry tickets, so Dad even bought us all an ice cream with a flake. Probably not the best idea before going on a roller coaster. Sammy went green after. See you when we get home. Love, Leo.
Enjoy great British summer savings, such as discounted entry to theme parks, soft play, and more. Funded by the UK government.
BetMGM Casino is backed by over 50 years of Las Vegas heritage. And if it's taught us anything about jackpots, it's that bigger is always better. Sign up now at BetMGM Casino and play for the UK's biggest online casino jackpot. Over £40 million. BetMGM Casino, the real deal. Verify at betmgm.co.uk. Minimum 10p stake. Minimum jackpot stake of 9p. T's and C's apply. 18 plus. Please gamble responsibly.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with Simon Marks.
And with Cheryl in Bromley. And Cheryl, you've called in as a result of our conversation about the civil service pensions scandal. Yes. Evening.
Yeah, evening. Yes, I have. So I've worked for the civil service for 42 years, and I'm just about ready to retire. There was a portal that you could go on to see your records, to see, to work out how much you'll be entitled to. When Capita took over, all those records disappeared. You went into the portal and there was no records there. I then, contacted them. When you try to contact them, I was 45 minutes on the phone. You contact them and then they say, "Oh, okay, we'll see what we can do. It's going to happen. By June, all the records will be there." I then went back into the portal in June. There was, my records of how much pension I'd paid into and how much I'd be entitled to wasn't there. My employment records were there. They were all wrong. They'd got me working at all different departments that I'd never worked at. I rang them again and I said, I want a quote because I should be retiring. I should have retired by now. I want a quote. I can't retire unless I've got a quote. And they said, yeah, we'll send it to you. And I said, when will I get it? And I said, oh, no, we're not giving any time deadlines on when we're going to send it to you.
I mean, this is outrageous, Cheryl. So are you saying that before that, you were able to log onto a site and at least see what you could expect?
Yeah, that was when the civil servants were doing
it.
And
now you just can't get any kind of a quote?
Correct. Capita took over, all that information disappeared. And I haven't got any information.
And so what is the consequence of that for you as you make the decision about whether you can retire or not?
I can't retire. I'm waiting. I'm working, and I shouldn't be working, and I really resent the fact that I'm working. I can't retire until I know how much pension I'm going to get. I've written to HR. They've written to Capita. No response. Nothing.
And Cheryl, just explain to people that you are by no means alone.
Oh, no. No, there's thousands and thousands of us. I get a union paper, the newspaper comes through. There's all examples. The people maybe probably worse than me. They were getting their pension and it stopped. It suddenly stopped. They weren't getting, or they've applied for their pension recently. And I know an example of a colleague of mine. They applied for the pension and it didn't come through. The pension didn't come through, and they've had to wait 6 months and live off their savings.
It's absolutely outrageous. Have you got any?
It's equivalent to the post office scandal.
I agree. I mean, that's what I was saying to my colleagues today who hadn't heard about this story, and I said, I think this is another smouldering post office scandal.
All the records have disappeared. I've got no proof of anything. think now, because they advised us, obviously, understandably, that don't keep paper records. They said, we won't be sending paper records anymore. What we'll do, you must, go to the portal. If you want paper records, you had to request them. So I did. I took the advice and I thought, right, okay, well, I'm just going electronic. I'm trying to save the planet, like everybody. I'm going electronic. And then now I haven't got any records of I've got records from 5 years ago, but I haven't got any up-to-date records of my pension. There's no record of it at all.
Well, I tell you what, Cheryl, I am personally very committed to keeping attention focused on this story because I think it's scandalous. I'm really grateful that you called in. I'm grateful we were able to find some time to talk about it this evening, and I wish you the very best of luck. I hope it gets sorted out as soon as possible so that your dream of retirement after 42 years working as a civil servant can finally dawn. We got lots of people that want to get on the air and talk about the future of water. Let's try and do this as a bit of a lightning round. Let's start with Mark in Long Stratton in Norfolk. Mark, what point would you like to make?
Good evening, Simon. Thank you for taking this. My point really was one of general quangoism, if there is such a word. And in fact, your recent contributions, including, that poor lady and her story with Capita, sort of add to my confusion about such things. Ofgem, Ofwat, Ofcom, DEFRA, they all seem to be institutions that aren't answerable to anyone. And I think particularly in the water industry, that's very worrying. I have an idea for water which would save us all sorts of problems. But
go on, what's your idea?
Well, I live near the Norfolk Broads. I was brought up on the Norfolk Broads. I'm used to the flow of water, this, that and the other. And I know that the rivers on the Norfolk Broads are partly saline because they feed off the Wash. But there is a constant movement of water, which it frustrates me every time on the water that nobody is using it to generate energy.
Yes.
It just seems bonkers. And every time I raise it with anybody who might be able to take it anywhere, they say, it's far too difficult.
Yeah, we've had discussion just over the last couple of weeks on the programme, Mark, about the idea of companies that want to open data centres being required to get involved in some fashion in tidal energy production.
Yes, you have. And that's sort of good, but it's only covering up the bad, probably.
Well, that's right. Precisely. Mark, thanks very much indeed for calling in. I mean, on all of those various Offies, Ofgem, Ofwat, Ofcom, I mean, they're all independent regulators. And I guess the question is, what does independence mean? If you're running Ofwat tonight and you're reading that Andy Burnham is angry with you, well, at the moment, there's not very much Andy Burnham can do because you're notionally and practically independent, even though you come under DEFRA. Let's go to Paul in Oswald Twistle in Lancashire. What a wonderfully named town, Paul. Good evening.
Yes, it is, Simon. Good evening. I think Andy Burnham can do something, and this is what I would do. I would make it so that the water companies could not recover the fines through customer bills. Instead, all the fines of millions of pounds come straight out of the shareholders, and that would make the share price tumble in the company, and the company would be able to be bought back at a much cheaper price.
And what would you do about controlling some of the compensation packages that are being offered and pocketed by the heads of these water companies?
I don't think they should have compensation. I think they should have some of the fines applied to their
garnish their wages.
Yeah,
I don't know if we use that phrase here, but in the United States it's garnishing someone's wages so the money gets taken out before they get paid.
Yeah. I mean, the water companies have even borrowed money to pay shareholders, putting more debt on the company. And if we want to buy it back, then it's going to cost us even more because we've that debt as well.
Well, and just that realisation that we had earlier in the hour, Paul, that the company that provides water for much of the Northwest is partly owned by BlackRock, the giant American investment firm.
Yeah.
And yet 85 to 90% of America's water industry is publicly owned municipal utilities. So you've got a huge American investment firm that can't make much money out of water in the United States, but is making money out of water here.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Britain's people are just being conned. They really are.
Well, let's see where it goes. Paul, thank you very much for calling in from the marvellous town of Oswald Twistle in Lancashire and from the equally marvellous town of Billericay in Essex. It's Louise. Good evening, Louise.
Oh, good evening, Simon. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you tonight?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I couldn't get over the timing of this question because I've just today completed a 7,000-word piece on water.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to read it to you now. No kidding. I'm going to try. It's very hard to put that into a bit of an overview, but it's really fascinating, Simon, because I thought I knew who broke our water system. But what I've actually found, I looked across 36 years and discovered that something surprising. People did see the problems. Regulators, governments, inquiries repeatedly intervened. Some fixes worked temporarily. But my key takeaway was nobody was responsible for connecting what all those institutions had learned over time, Simon. So companies and investors were adapting to the incentives faster than regulation could adapt to them. So what I would do is I would reverse engineer. I would start with purpose. What do we want our water system to do? And then design a system for the behaviour that people will actually display. The key point is we need something I'm calling stewardship, which is not another regulator, but it's a function that has to responsibility to learn how the system and the world around it are changing.
So is that do you think what Andy Burnham means when he talks about public control as opposed to public ownership?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think that the public versus private is the correct first question, because I think that we've got evidence enough that both of them have failed in different ways. I think it needs to be a hybrid. I'm sure people have mentioned Paris and the water system there. But I think we need to accept that if a system needs repairing this often, Simon, we reach a point where we say it needs redesigning.
Absolutely. Louise, thanks very much indeed for calling in. Good to hear that. Very interesting. And let's go to Phil in Broadstairs. Evening, Phil.
Good evening, Simon. Hi. I'd just like to connect, if I may. I was going to talk strictly about the water company, but I'd like to connect, if I may, your point about the post office scandal and this pension scandal and the water company scandal.
You can do it, but it's going to have to be quick, Phil.
Okay. How many seconds have I got?
About a minute.
That's fine. Okay. So the point is, all these are, I would most characterise them as crimes of the Crown, because all these things come from the fact that we have a constitutional setup, which is the Crown, which does not respond to accountability or anything else. So what you get is a lot of these companies will then say, oh dear, we'll pay compensation. I mean, look at the post office. No compensation, as far as I know, has been paid out to most of the people. Look at the Windrush, no compensation. Look at the Mau Mau veterans, no compensation. I go back to Aberfan in 1965. It happened when I was at school. These scandals go on and they get inquiries which in the end do not result in control. We have to start to consider what is our constitutional setup before we start fiddling about with individual things and doing individual
and
inquiries.
You may get your wish, Phil, because Andy Burnham is certainly interested in looking at our constitutional setup. Thanks very much indeed. Sorry I haven't got more time for you, but I think you got your the thrust of your point across. That is it from me for tonight. It's been a pleasure being with you. Tomorrow night at 7, Ranveer Singh will be here. Henry Riley will be here on Monday from 7. I'll be back with you later this month. Coming up at 1 here on LBC, it's Clive Bull. But first, a very big night for Ben Kentish.
It certainly is. Simon, thank you very much indeed. Hello there. Welcome to the programme.